Message is being broadcast by the Department of Defense of the Republic. At 2 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, multiple unidentified objects were confirmed to have entered Earth's atmosphere.
Discovery Houston, 20 seconds to LOS T-drift.
Roger, nice to be in orbit. The first message that comes to me is you are a divine being. You matter. You count. You come from realms of unimaginable power and light, and you will return to those realms.
The vast stretches of the unknown and the unanswered and the unfinished still far outstrip our collective comprehension.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Broadcasting from Forest Tower Studios, all the way from the Deep South. Now, here is your host, Joe Root.
Good evening. It is Wednesday night, August the 15th. We are broadcasting from the Deep South, and I'm laughing because I'm looking at my spelling of consciousness. It's crazy. But yeah, tonight, it's going to be a special night tonight. So yeah, the moon is still doing its wax on into midnight. But I want to make sure we always got to do this before we start the show. You got to fire up them chakras, sync both hemispheres of your brain together, and shoot your magical beam of light through your third eye with us tonight on our journey into the void, looking for truth. Now, I don't know if you can actually do that, but just imagine yourself doing that. That's the cool part about it. So yeah, tonight is a special night, and I'll tell you why. Real quick, I'm going to tell you that we're live on lightingthevoid.com, KTLK Digital Broadcasting, The Fringe FM, and all those lovely affiliates that carry us. A special shout out to TalkStream Live, and make sure that you use that listen line if anything happens to your internet, which is 701-719-3971. Tonight, we're going to be talking with Thomas Campbell. I mean, need I say more? Thomas Campbell, NASA physicist, right? Author of My Big Toe. You can't ask for better than this. It's a scientific conversation tonight. But it is a scientific conversation about consciousness. And I'm looking at my spelling here on Spreaker. I got to fix that, but I'll fix that in a minute. Consciousness. But yeah, Thomas Campbell, this is going to be the second time that I've actually got to speak to him. But tonight's going to be a little different. We were going to speak with Nancy Red Star, but something came up, and we're not really going to get to do that. So I planned on doing this Monday, but the universe said, you know what, you're going to do it tonight. So that's what we're doing tonight. And I want to say thank you to all of you who've donated to the show and your support, however you've supported us. Thank you very much, whether it's through donations, the Amazon portal, the Audible trial, getting Freighter Xavier's courses, getting a T-shirt, all of that stuff really helps out. The donations is probably the best way to help the show, but any way that you guys help has been incredible. I mean, I got this lovely chair to be thankful for. I got so much to be thankful for that I feel like I have to express it every single day, and I know it's getting annoying to you, but I just feel like I got to. Follow us on social media if you can. Facebook, Twitter, YouTube is all Lighting the Void. And the Void Walkers newsletter is there. It just comes out once a month. You just sign up with your name and email. That's totally free, just for you. And we're going to have some better swag coming out. I'm working on a lot of stuff at once. So I hope that you can just be patient with me on that. I do know some of you got your stuff in the mail. You've been sending me thank yous, so I appreciate that as well. And I want to say thank you to my team, Eric Markham, Jeremy Scott, and all those insiders who help me so much every day. And if you do tweet something, make sure you put hashtag LTV radio on there. The thing about let me just explain tonight real quick. So tonight we were supposed to speak with Nancy Red Star, but I think a miscommunication happened or something. There's actually a real story to it. I don't want to get into it, but I didn't want to. It's just not the right time to interview her. And I had this interview in the hole, ready to go for Monday. And the cool thing is I just did this. I mean, I did an interview with Thomas Campbell. I was on Nicole Frolick's podcast. We just launched Suzanne Ross's show today. So I think I've been busy, but I've had so much fun. So what we're going to get to do tonight is you and I together are going to get to kick back and listen to this show. Now, I'm still here. I'm not going anywhere. I've never done this before, but for a guy like Thomas Campbell, I have to. And you guys know why, because you know that I'm into consciousness, I'm into astral travel, and this is the guy that pretty much created the HemiSync trademark. He was there when it all came together. If you've ever read Robert Monroe's books, you'll know that he was talked about in the books, and when it comes to putting it to paper and doing the experiments, he's the man. We've talked about the Kickstarter that he started, you know, I always said it was to prove that we live in some type of larger consciousness system. But he will explain this a little bit better than the way that I do. So if science is one of those things that kind of, I guess, bores you, you know, stick around, because we're going to talk about some other stuff too. We're going to relate it to the out-of-body experience. We're going to ask him some questions about it. But if you don't know who Thomas Campbell is for some wild reason, then let me tell you. Tom Campbell began researching altered states of consciousness with Robert Monroe, who was the author of Journeys Out of the Body, Far Journeys, and The Ultimate Journey. At Monroe Laboratories in the early 1970s, where he and a few others were instrumental in getting Monroe's laboratory for the study of consciousness up and running. These early drug-free consciousness pioneers helped design experiments, develop the technology for creating specific altered states, and were the main subjects. And they were the main subjects, I guess you could say the guinea pigs, all at the same time. Now, Campbell has been experimenting with and exploring the subjective and objective mind ever since. And for the past 30 years, Campbell has been focused on scientifically exploring the properties, boundaries, and abilities of consciousness. Now, during that same time period, he has excelled as a working scientist, a professional physicist dedicated to pushing back the frontiers of cutting-edge technology, large system simulation, technology development and integration, and complex system vulnerability and risk analysis. Presently, and for the past 20 years, he has been at the heart of developing U.S. missile defense systems. He is a TC physicist described in Robert Monroe's second book, Far Journeys. Or he was the TC physicist, described in Robert Monroe's second book, Far Journeys, and has been a serious explorer for the frontiers of reality, mind, consciousness, and psychic phenomena since the early 1970s. My Big Toe is a model, which is his book, My Big Toe, a 3-part book. It's a model of existence and reality that is based directly on his scientific research and first-hand experience. It represents the results and conclusions of 30 years of careful scientific exploration of the boundaries and contents of reality from both the physical and metaphysical viewpoints. Tom has made every effort to approach his explorations without bias or preconceived notions. There is no belief system, dogma, creed, or unusual assumptions in any of this. This is all at the root of My Big Toe. By demanding high-quality, repeatable, empirical, evidential data to separate what's real from what's imaginary or illusionary, Campbell has scientifically derived this general model of reality. If you have any questions or comments for Thomas, you can always reach him at author@my-big-toe.com. And I want to say that thank you for, spending this time with me again. I really appreciate it because I know you're a busy man.
Yeah, I got a lot going on. I'm got more email than I can possibly answer. It's my problem right now. I've been traveling a lot. When I travel a lot, it gets backed up, and pretty soon the backlog is so deep that it's just impossible to deal with. So, I don't know. The pile gets bigger faster than I can get through it. So,
yeah, I'm sure. I've mentioned your Kickstarter quite a bit. I wanted to ask you a little bit about, I was so surprised how fast that got funded. And I think that, I've been talking about it to everybody. And from what I understand is that you're going to try to do some more experiments, but I don't want to talk for you. Can you explain what that's about a little bit so I don't misrepresent you on that?
Sure. Kickstarter, by the rules that are set up by Kickstart, can only last 30 days. Okay, that's why it kind of came and went in a rush, because that's it. You can't run those any longer than 30 days. And you have an amount that you have an amount that you specify, and if you make less than that, if the donations are less than that, then you give it all back. They're not really donations, they're pledges. If the pledges are greater than that, then within the 30 days, then you get to keep it and send T-shirts and mugs and everything else that you promised to all the people that came on. So we had a target figure of 150,000, and we got there in less than, in about a week and a half. We were not even halfway through when we got to that point. So that was good. We ended up with, I think, about $236,000, which was quite a bit better than the 150 that we were shooting for. Now we shot for the 150. I thought that was ambitious, and to tell you the truth, I was thinking it would be a long shot for us to actually get 150,000. So I was delighted, as you might guess, the fact that we did so much better. So that 150 was supposed to pay for, at least to get us started, to get a couple of the experiments done. But now that we got more, we may be able to get them all done.
Right.
So I've got 5 different experiments, and if you're interested in those, I can send you let's see, how can I do this right here? Well, I can send it to you in the email. I can send you our excuse me, same old cough, had it for months. We can send you what I call a request for information, which is a thing that we send out to physicists and to physics departments, telling them what the task is and asking them to bid on it, basically. Or it's not really bid on it. It's a grant that we're going to give to them. But we ask them to say how much it'll cost, how quickly can they get it done, and why should we have you guys do it? What's your bona fides, and have you done this work before? So it's that kind of a thing. It's a request for information for the people doing experiments. So I have that I could send you so that you could see just what the experiments are and what we're asking for. So if you've got an interest in the experiments, is that something you'd like?
Yeah, I would really like to see that, actually. Do you feel confident that you could prove in some way that we live in some type of virtual reality with these experiments? To me, the double slit says a lot. But do you feel like that we can scientifically prove this? Because to me, when you say, hey, let's scientifically prove that we just live in a realm of mind and consciousness, almost like a virtual reality, it almost sounds to me like it's impossible to prove that.
Yeah, you're right. No, you can't prove. You don't prove things anymore in science. Proof isn't what you look for. There's nothing that you can ever do that will be 100% certain with no uncertainty, because we don't know what information may come up in the future. So nothing is 100%. We gave that up back in the 1800s with Newton. Newton came out with Newton's laws, and it's like, well, these are laws. That means this is the way the world works, and it'll work like this, for time immemorial. These are, will never be. These will never change. Well, they did change. In another 100 years or so, quantum mechanics said, well, Newton, nice work, but that only applies to a very limited set of reality. If you go faster than normal speeds, if you go down to smaller than normal sizes, your laws just all fall apart. They're not really laws. They're just a description of the way science works in the macro realm, as long as you don't go too fast to get too small. So since that time, we don't have, the law of thermodynamics or the law of quantum mechanics or the law of relativity. We have the theory of relativity and theory of quantum mechanics. So science moves not with proof, because certainty is what laws are made out of. Science moves with evidence. Okay? It's about evidence. So what I hope to do with these experiments is produce some compelling evidence that this reality is indeed based on information. That is, that it's a virtual reality. That's the point. Now, what's my confidence level that I'll do that? Well, it's hard to say. When I was asked that back in 2016, when I first presented these, I said something like about, 80% or so. And the reason that's not 100% is, here's the way science works, is that you have a theory. Okay, I have a theory. I have a theory of consciousness, and that theory of consciousness allows me to derive quantum mechanics from basic principles. Totally different, though, way of approaching quantum mechanics from the viewpoint of virtual reality rather than from the viewpoint of, materialist reality. So I try to take my ideas of consciousness and apply them to physics experiments, double slit experiment in particular, let's say, and try to rework the theory in terms of virtual reality to produce all the same answers that all the quantum mechanics experiments have gotten, so that I can explain quantum mechanics from my viewpoint of virtual reality. Well, to do that, I have to make some assumptions. I have to make some assumptions about how the larger consciousness system, the rendering engine of this reality, is going to make the choices it has to make. You see, when you make a simulation, you can get to the end product of that simulation, many different ways. There's lots of different ways to simulate something. It's not like there's just one way. You can do things in different orders. You can do things, it's the simulation's creator that gets to pick which of the possible ways they're going to use. Now, I have a few assumptions that says that the larger conscious system will tend to pick computing processes that are efficient. It's got a lot to compute, and it's had a lot of time to optimize the way it does things. So I expect that whatever it does, it's going to be very optimal. It's going to take, in computer language, that's called parsimonious. It's going to be very parsimonious the way it does it. It's going to be very efficient the way it does it. And I think that's just the nature of the way the larger conscious system is going to run its reality. The virtual reality will be encoded with a rule set, and it's all going to be very efficient. So that's one rule. So now if there's 5 different ways that it could approach something, I'll look at the one that's the most efficient from a computer science perspective and say, well, that's the one that the larger conscious system is going to take. It's got to run through that path because that's the optimal path. That's the most efficient path. So it's those kinds of things that I have to guess. Now, so the one rule that the rendering engine has to obey, there's actually 2 rules, but I say it as 2 rules. One rule actually wraps it all up, but let me be consistent and say it as 2 rules, as I usually do, and that is that 1, it has to abide by the rule set. The rendering engine that renders our virtual reality is not going to render something that the rule set doesn't support. It's only going to compute things based on the rule set. Okay, that's the same with World of Warcraft. Your elf is not going to start flapping its arms and flying through the sky because the rule set doesn't support that. So it's not going to happen there. Okay, and now they could change the rule set to make that an option, But as it is now, that's just impossible. It doesn't work that way. Rule set doesn't support it. So that's one of the constraints on the rendering engine that renders us virtual reality. The other constraint is it can't render things that create conflicts with what's happened before, right? Which means, we can't wake up in the morning and find out that San Francisco is south of Los Angeles.
Right.
It's just not, it can't do that. We've got history, the way things are, and the way things are going to be next delta T has to be according to the rule set and can't logically conflict with history, with what we've got, because then you'd have a reality where things just didn't make any sense. There were all these logical disparities and conflicts, and that'd just be part of your reality. Well, that's not a very good reality. You can't depend on it if it's got kind of random logical conflicts. So with those two things, the system may have 2 or 3 ways that it can get out of a conflict. Oh, looks like a situation's coming up where it needs to do something that could create a conflict for it. All right, it's got A, B, C, and D, or different ways that it could avoid that conflict. And it's probably going to do it with the most efficient code. Well, then that's the way that I predict it'll happen. And that's where my experiments come from.
Gotcha.
So I've looked at those two things, and I've said, okay, because it has to eliminate conflicts and because it has to stick with the rule set, this is the way I think it would do that most optimally. Now, there's some risk there. What if I don't know what the most optimal solution is? Maybe I just think I know what the most optimal solution is, and there's some other solution that's actually better computer science than the one I picked. That sort of thing. Now, I'm pretty aware of the conflicts. I know what a conflict will be, but I don't always know what the system is going to do as far as the best path. And it's not obligated to always take the most efficient path. It may, for its own reasons, to say, well, in this situation, with that conflict, I'm going to do something that is sloppy code, but it's going to patch me through to an answer that's going to work. And it may do that. So you see, it's not like there's a law that says it has to use the most efficient process. So now what I've done with my experiments is I've tried to set up a situation where I back the larger consciousness system, the rendering engine, into a corner. I set it up for a conflict, just like the original double slit did. You see, the original double slit, when you start throwing particles at those two slits one at a time, you set it up for a conflict. You stick it in a corner, and now you just sit back and say, well, how's it going to escape this one? You see, because if it let those particles one at a time do just what you expect one at a time things do, like Newton said, travel in a straight line, because there's no external force on them, they'd all pile up behind the slit. But we also had optics. We had photons by the millions coming through those slits. And what they do is form diffraction patterns. You see?
Right.
Now, there's nothing that says whether a million slits go through a million particles go through the slit or one particle goes through the slit. Doesn't make any difference. It's the particle in the slit. It's not like these little particles, are talking to each other or bumping into each other, and that makes them go into, random bumps into the particles, makes them distribute themselves in diffraction patterns. That's ridiculous. So the system was between a rock and a hard place, because we were clever enough to do a double slit experiment that forced it to decide, okay, what are you going to show them? You're going to show them particles, or you're going to show them a wave, because they're both the same thing. All those little particles make up the wave. And if you're going to get a diffraction pattern and you're not going to have a logical conflict with optics, you're going to have to make those particles distribute themselves in a diffraction pattern, even though there's no forces on them. You see?
Right.
So we backed the system into the corner and forced it to show us a little bit of, what's behind the curtain, if you will, a little bit of how it does its calculations. And that's what the double slit did. Now, I've done the same thing. I've given the system a situation where I back it up in a corner, and it's got to either show us a little bit of the magic behind the curtain, show us, how it actually calculates this reality, ways in which we don't know, ways that are likely to be surprising to us, or it's going to have a conflict on its hands. So that's what my experiments are all about. So the double slit experiment did provide a lot of evidence that this is not a materialistic reality, because real material particles don't just distribute themselves in diffraction patterns for no good reason, you see?
It would have came out the same way, whether it was observed or not. It would have done the same thing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So that was something that wouldn't happen if this was a material world. So that experiment told us that the fundamental reality is not materialistic. Okay, but the scientists look at that and they don't like that idea, because that kind of trashes the beliefs that they have. So they hem and haw and say things, yeah, but the particles are really, really small, and maybe there's a whole different physics for small things. And, so they make up all this nonsense rather than seeing that it is indeed not a materialist-based reality. So now we have other quantum mechanics experience. We have the Zeno effect. We have the delayed erasures. We have all of these things, and every one of them is pounding another nail into the casket of materialism. Each one says, this won't happen if you had material particles, but it does happen anyway. Therefore, reality is not made out of material particles. So now we have dozens of these experiments that basically are producing evidence, but the evidence tends to be stuff that people can wave their hands at. And, like I said, well, it's so tiny, maybe it's got a different rule set. Well, that doesn't make sense to me. Physics is physics. You got a rule set. This whole simulation evolved under a rule set, and those rules apply all the way up. So if I've come up with some experiments that are even more dramatic than the double slit, because they involve matter, things doing impossible things. They have atoms decaying. An atom decays a little particle. That's the radiation. A little particle flies out at some random direction out of the nucleus. And in one of my experiments, I predict how that particle will fly out. Well, it is supposedly, if this is a material reality, that has to be a random process, the direction that it flies out. Nobody knows how it's going to fly out. It just does whatever it does at that instant. Well, I'm able to predict that with one of my experiments. So now it's not just tiny little particle having a problem in that sense. It's atoms. It's nuclei. It's the way chunks of matter radiate. It's the way they give off particles, the way they degenerate. So it has to do with the basic energetics of the material world. And it's saying that it's computed. It's not just random, that it gets computed, because in this situation, you can predict it. And the other one I have is a beam splitter. And a beam splitter is a thing that light goes into and can either transmit or reflect when it gets to the beam splitter. That's why they call it a beam splitter. Half the time it transmits, half the time it reflects. And it's a random thing. I set up an experiment where the experimenter can predict which one it's going to do. When that photon gets to that chunk of glass, is it going to reflect, or is it going to transmit through it? Well, that's impossible. So you see, I'm forcing the system to do something that's dramatic in order to maintain consistency and not cover up, and not end up with an inconsistency or do something that is not in consonance with the rule set. So that's what these do. And because they're dramatic with radioactive elements, chunks of matter that are radioactive, and with pieces of, treated glass to be beam splitters, these are big things in the macro world. These aren't just loose individual particles flying around that nobody can see, or whatever. It's not that sort of thing. A beam splitter is something you can hold in your hand. So is radioactive material, something you can hold in your hand. So it just makes a little more dramatic statement than the original double slit that this cannot be a material-based reality for these things to happen this way. But you see, if they don't happen this way, there's going to be a big conflict. So what's the system going to do? Now, like I say, I've come to these things based on my own assumptions of what is the optimal code and what is the way that the system will work. They don't have to be that way. But in any case, I will learn a lot. So don't look at it as Tom Campbell against the world. Tom Campbell says these quantum mechanics things are going to be this way, and all the quantum physicists on the planet say, it doesn't work that way. And, David and Goliath go out to the field and fight. It's not like that. I'm a scientist. I get to a point where my theory that I'm developing from consciousness that is now going to generate quantum mechanics from first principles, I get to a point where I'm stuck, and I say, well, I don't know whether the system would do it this way or that way. I don't know whether they'd code it this way or that, or whether they'd solve this conflict this way or that way. I need an experiment to tell me which way it'll go. So that's how I get there. I don't get there because I'm trying to do stunts that will, show that this is not a materialist reality. That's not how I arrived there.
Yeah, you're not trying to be like Jack Parsons and do something crazy to prove something crazy, right?
No,
So
that's not it. I'm a scientist. I get to the point where I'm stuck, and I say, well, I'm just not sure how the rendering engine is going to call this. I can see there's multiple ways for them to get to where they have to go, and, what are they going to do? When I back them into the corner, what are they going to do? They're going to show us something that's virtually impossible, or are they going to leave a conflict in the reality hanging loose, or are they going to do something else? Right. I don't think they're going to have a conflict loose in the reality. That's not according to the rules. So they're going to do something, and that's what I don't know exactly how it will go. So that's why I make the experiment. So I'm going to win no matter how these things come out, because if they come out the way I like, then okay, my assumptions were right. Or looks like they might be right anyway. If it doesn't come out the way I predict, I'm going to learn something. Well, the way I thought was the most effective way, or the most straightforward calculation, maybe isn't. I'll start looking for something else, see what it did do, and try to understand why did it do that. Because right now, my quantum mechanics that I derive from virtual reality has answered all the quantum mechanics experiments. I haven't seen any of the experiments that it doesn't work with. So that's good news. But I really don't know what it's going to do here. So I'm going to learn something, and I will refine my theory as I get these experiments done. And as these experiments are done, let's say they don't work out the way I say, well, they will suggest new experiments. Oh, okay, well, we eliminated that variable. Now, what about these other two? Let's do another experiment and see if we can pick that apart.
Okay.
That's the way science is done. If you look at the history of science, it's not like some smart guy walks up and says, I got the answer, and from then on, everything works exactly the way he says. It doesn't usually work that way. Typically, somebody has an idea. They do some experiments to verify whether their theory is going the right way or not. Then they learn something. Then they do some more experiments, and they learn something. And eventually, they are able to predict, the results of experiments very accurately. That's typical science. It doesn't just happen all at once with somebody figuring it out. It typically is a process of learning and growth and understanding that takes place, over some time. At least that's how it's been in the past. Now, I don't know how these are going to come out. They may come out exactly the way I call them, or they may not. But I will learn something valuable and will be able to take my theory forward however they come out. So that's a scientist's viewpoint of what's going on. Now, I know you get out into the non-scientist viewpoint where, out in the large world, it looks like a David and Goliath story, or it looks like this guy with a lot of wild claims thinks he knows more than the quantum physicists do about their own theory. And that kind of looks like a whole different game, but that's really not what's going on in the science in the science world. This is just normally the way these things work. And today, the only difference is that, it used to be scientists all work in universities or in their own little space, and they never really communicated to the outer world much. So the outer world never really sees all the dramas that go on in science until they finally get to the end of something. But these days, it's not like that. And particularly all the things that I talk about when I talk about science, I try to talk about them in language that the average person can understand. I don't talk about them in just in physics terms that only, 1/100th of 1% of the population can understand. So because they have impacts that are important to everyone, they have impacts like coming up with, what is your purpose? Why are you here? What's this life all about? Why does it work this way? How come there's a thing, called remote viewing, or a thing called, the placebo effect? How come those things exist in our reality? We know they're real things, but why? How do they work? And what are they doing in this reality? So we have all of these questions, and this idea about finding out who we are, why we are, and what our purpose is affects everyone. So it's not a thing I want to keep in physics speak. It's a thing I want to talk about to, the average person. So I talk to lay people. When I brought these experiments out in 2016 in LA, it was all on a level that individual people would be able to understand. There was no physics. Well, there was a little physics speak there. You have to say a little, but I tried to minimize it and keep it as simple as possible.
Sure.
Because there's a lot more at stake here than just better physics. It's better living. It's a better planet. It's a better society. A better economic system. A better life for everybody is at stake. So everybody needs to kind of know what's going on. That creates a little drama, and the drama isn't the point. It's just the point is that this is science. So that, in a nutshell, is about the experiments, right. And where they come from and why they're there, and what the results mean. The results mean that I'm going to learn a lot. I know that. Exactly how they're going to turn out, we won't know till the experiment's done, because that's the way experiments are, right? That's why you have to do the experiment. It's because you don't. If you knew exactly how it was going to come out, you wouldn't have to do it. But you have to see what the real world says about how the system will solve your problem. So that is where we are. So does that now make sense to you?
Yeah, it makes sense. I just a second here. Let me switch this. So my question is if Thomas Campbell, we all got to leave this earth, right? So when Thomas Campbell leaves this earth, what are you hoping to leave behind? Because look, we got a lot of men like you. Like, I don't think it's Thomas Campbell against the world. I believe there's a lot of people on your side. Whether they can pull off what you're trying to do or not, it's a different story. But what are you wanting to leave with us? What is, like, if you could reach a main goal and say, I accomplished it, is there a main goal that you would like to accomplish?
Oh, sure. Main goal. I'd probably have a whole tiered set of goals. Get to the very main one that's at the bottom, and the one that's the biggest and makes the most difference. That would be the goal of this being a kinder, gentler world for us to live in. That people begin to grow up because they see that they see which direction up is, and they see why they're here, and they see the point of it, and they see that most of the pain that they suffer is self-created. So if that happened, then this world would change dramatically. It could change in just a few decades. In 20 or 30 years, you could see this going from where it is today to something that nobody would even imagine could have ever been true. That is possible because we have the infrastructure now to support that level of change. Everything changes faster than it used to. We are able to do this now. So that would be the biggest thing in this theory. It's not even about the physics. It's about what this could mean when people understand that what we call our physical reality is a subset of something larger, more fundamental. And once they understand that that larger fundamental thing is consciousness, a consciousness system, and that the purpose and point of a consciousness system has to be, it's not just my wishing it was that way, but has to logically be that it is about caring, about about love. That's what it's about, and that justifies our virtual reality. It's an entropy reduction trainer. I think we were through most of this when we talked last time.
Yeah.
So that's the point, and that will come out, and that will be a big paradigm shift, bigger than any of the paradigm shifts humanity's ever seen before. Bigger than fire, bigger than the wheel, bigger than Newtonian physics and quantum mechanics. And relativity all wrapped up together, bigger than all of that. It's going to make a huge difference to humanity. Now, it's not a one-man show. It's not that I'm going to show this. It's me and probably 10,000 other people in the world who are pushing in that direction. I see all kinds of things, from people and books and ideas talking about not only about virtual reality, but talking about that they're about consciousness, about there's a spiritual dimension to existence, that sort of thing. It's all of this has to work together. My part is just going to be if it works the way I hope, it's going to be to get the scientists, the physicists, to state unequivocally that this is a virtual reality. And I see that coming, whether I'm on the scene or not. They've been moving that direction over the last decade and a half. They've gone from almost nobody thinking that's a good idea to where physics departments today have dozens of people in them. I don't mean dozen worldwide. I mean every physics department probably has dozens of people in it that think virtual reality is the only solution. So it's the thing that's growing. What I see is because the physicists, the scientists today are the people that everybody believes. That's, I call them the high priests of Western culture because the high priests are the people who traditionally told everybody else what was true.
Right.
Everybody else relied on the high priests to tell them, to separate fact from fiction, what was true. And they listened to the high priests. Well, today, our high priests are the physicists, the scientists. And if the scientists come out and say, yes, this is a fact, this is a virtual reality, it's a subset of something larger, that will take these ideas out of the margins and put them in the mainstream. These ideas have been in the mainstream for millennia. You have the Buddha 2,400 years ago saying this is a virtual reality. Well, he said it a little differently. He said this reality is all an illusion. It's the same sort of thing. You also have that coming out of most of the mystical schools like Sufism and Kabbalism and Gnosticism. And you can, these are people, all these schisms that were in what was called mystical school. These are people who were able to make a connection with the larger consciousness system and get a sense of how reality worked. But they couldn't express it other than in terms of poetry. It just had to be in terms of describing their experiences and how they interpreted those experiences. So we've had the Buddha do that. And you read the Bhagavad Gita, it's poetry. You have to interpret it, you see. And that's the way the mysticism has been. Yes, it starts with people who have a connection to the larger system, who understand something, but the metaphors they use, the excuses or reasons they put together why it is that way, you see, that's all their own stuff they're bringing into it. That's right. Not necessarily the reality. It's just their own stuff they're bringing into it. What's different with mine is that it's science. You see, my end game here is moving the physicists to a different viewpoint. I can't do that with poetry. I can't say, hey, all you physicists, listen to my poetry and you'll change your minds about reality. It doesn't work that way. You have to present scientists with facts, with logic, with experiments. Well, my big toe, my theory of everything, which is basically a theory of consciousness, and from consciousness everything else flows, okay, that is logical. It's not poetry. You start with very simple assumptions, and after that it's deductive and inductive, mostly deductive logic all the way through it. There isn't anything there that it's like, well, this could happen for 10 reasons, I'll pick one. They all got down to the logic says it had to happen for this reason. Nothing else will support the logic. So it's this deterministic logic chain that ends up with a theory of consciousness that ends up predicting how quantum mechanics experiments will go, that ends up making these experiments. So it is science. Otherwise, the Buddha couldn't come up with quantum mechanics experiments. You see, you can't do that. Neither can anybody else that's in a poetical, mystical thing. They can't. They have interpretations of visions and things that we're seeing and understandings. Well, for the most case, a lot of those visions seen and understandings were correct, but interpretations, not so much. Eastern religions, some of them kept the interpretations to a minimum. They're a little closer to the truth than others, but you have this understanding. Now it's science, it's logical, it's creating experiments. And if the high priests of Western culture say this is true, this is a virtual reality, the logical ramifications of that are tremendous. Just that statement, because now what the Buddha knew and what thousands and thousands of other people have known from their own experience, but they've never been able to put it into science, so it always hangs out in the margins. We've had this understanding in the margins, like I say, for millennia. For probably 3,000 years, humans have had access to this information, but it's all poetry, and poetry doesn't change anybody else's mind, particularly if these other people don't know how to interpret it because they've never had the experience. It just sounds like mumbo jumbo. It's not credible. Okay, so when we get to the point where the high priests take this out of the margins, put it into the mainstream, then we've got something that's never happened since humanity's crawled out of the trees. We have a whole new situation here where this understanding is now moving into the mainstream, and people will respond to it. People are hungry for understanding the point and purpose of their life. They're hungry for seeing ways to go from misery and pain to happiness and a better life. It's not like nobody gives a damn. I'm happy with my pain. I really don't. I'm not interested. You're not going to find that. Once people see that we're talking about something has to be more fundamental, more significant than this physical reality. And this physical reality is a derivative, a virtual reality, a simulation created in this other system that's more fundamental. Well, why? You don't just create a simulation because you're bored and don't have anything else to do.
Yeah, exactly.
There's reasons why it has to be that way. Why was it created this way? Why the rule set like this? And you can answer all those questions. The anthropic principle, you can answer. That's a big mystery in physics. Well, this answers it. Why is C a constant? This answers it. Make quantum mechanics into a logical science rather than a weird science. Well, this does that. So it's just better physics. So whether I'm involved in it or not isn't the big deal. It's that there's thousands and tens of thousands of people who've been pushing at this from the margins for a very long time. Our own social structures are such that there is a very large majority yearning for something better. If they see this, then that would be that something. That says, take responsibility for yourself. Stop blaming all of your misery on other people and grow up. You see, get rid of your fear, get rid of your ego, get rid of all that stuff that makes you miserable. And if that were known not in the margins, but in the mainstream, and people started to take that seriously, no, everybody isn't going to change in a week. but over 20, 30, 40 years, you could see the biggest paradigm shift ever. So that's the number one thing. And in the meanwhile, the collateral things that'll happen is that you will rewrite science entirely. We will finally let go of this materialistic viewpoint. This materialistic viewpoint has trapped science to a point where it's having a real hard time taking the next step forward because it's trapped in a belief trap. That's not the way the world works. And experiments are showing that. Not just mine, I hope, but lots of others have shown that.
Yeah.
So we're getting to that point where it's almost inevitable that the scientists are going to come this way. And when you see that this is a simulation, coming to the conclusion that it must be consciousness that is the master system, that is also just deductive logic. When you go through all the possibilities, that's the only one that hits all the data points. There's a few others that'll get some of the data points here and some of the data points there, but if you want to draw a line through all the facts that we know, then that's the only one that explains all the facts. So that's just a logical thing too. So it's just better ideas. It's the way the world works, and eventually we're going to get there. But I'd like to live in this kinder, gentler place. If it takes us another millennia to figure it out, what a shame that so many people should live in such misery and so on for so long when we have everything we need right in front of us to do better. So yes, the second thing it would do would rewrite science. Suddenly science would have a whole different viewpoint underneath of it. Rip out the old foundation, put in a more flexible, bigger picture foundation, and science will start bubbling up with all kinds of marvelous things that we never even realized, could have been possible, because suddenly we will have opened up the gates to a bigger picture of how our reality works. So yes, it'll rewrite science. That's another big thing. Science is neat. Science and technology is part of the reason that you were finally able to make this transition into the mainstream.
Right.
So that's where it's going. That's what's important about it.
Well, I talk to a lot of people, Mr. Campbell, that do things like, they say they do interdimensional travel through stargates, or things like magicians, where they stack the deck on their subconscious, whether they're drawing sigils or using incense or candles, and it's almost like, right, if you looked at it in a I guess a computive type of way, it's almost like they're stacking the deck on their subconscious to create some type of manifestation.
Yeah, that's not a hard thing to do. We discussed last time that intent modifies future probability.
Yeah.
So that's how you can heal with your mind. That's why the placebo effect works. So yes, you can do that, and if rituals help you focus your intent, then you can use rituals.
What do you do though? Have you figured out a way to? To me, maybe all that stuff's unnecessary. Maybe we were doing these things because we just didn't understand, the placebo or tricking the subconscious, if you want to say, because these things have to change our whole paradigm in order to manifest something small, which is kind of crazy to me, that we have to do that to begin with. Is there another way?
Another way to where get to the end point,
or just to manifest. I say I want to manifest a better life or a better job opportunity or
right,
a better partner in my life, instead of lighting a candle and it's a pink candle and saying this prayer and messing with my whole paradigm. Is there another way to do this?
Sure.
Okay.
Well, sure. That's the thing. Once you understand how the reality works, all of that stuff becomes simple. Instead of mysterious stuff with magic potions and magic candles and all the rest of it and the incense burning and et cetera, all that stuff is all beside the point. The only active ingredient is your intent modifying future probability. You see? So whether you are, whatever it is you're trying to do, and there's a few things that affect how well you can do that with your intent. It's how well is your intent focused. Okay, well, if your mind is full of noise, then you're not going to focus very well. Most people's mind are full of noise. That's why you learn to meditate, because that helps you get rid of all the thoughts that are just stray thoughts flying through your mind all the time. That makes your focus very weak. So that's one thing that's required. Another thing is that this intent can't be intellectual. It has to be an intent from the being level. And most of us in Western culture live out of our heads. We live out of the intellectual level. We go being level. What's that? Well, the being level is who you are at your core. A lot of your being level is your emotions and your feelings. A lot of it has to do also with your fears and your ego and the rest of that stuff. If you get rid of your fears, you don't have a subconscious. You are one whole thing and you're aware of all of it. You only have a subconscious because you have fears.
Gotcha.
You have things you want to cover up. You can't deal with them. So a lot of who you really are is not even accessible to your intellect. So first, you have to get rid of the noise. Secondly, you have to become authentic. You have to become who you are instead of living up to what your society says you should be, what you think you should be, what you'd like other people to see you as, because the things that you'd like to have, you want a new Mercedes, you want a prettier girlfriend, it's all that stuff is ego and fear junk. Well, that gets in your way. So if you want to manifest things, then you have to get rid of your fear, get rid of your ego, get rid of your beliefs, get rid of the noise in your mind, understand that you exist at your being level as an authentic person and work from there. So why does it seem to be so hard? Well, all those things aren't easy, but it's what we can do. As consciousness, we can do all that. And why do you have the rituals? Why do you need the pink candles? Because all of that is trying to trick you into letting go of your intellect and working from your being level. And you work at it and get into kind of a meditative state or a trance state, however you want to say, and that's to quiet the noise. So the ways that people go about these things, trying to manifest, trying to do magic or whatever else, all of it is just tools that they use to clear their mind, to focus their mind, and to work out of their being level. They have to find that being level. Okay, once you get into a meditation state, get rid of all your external input so you let go of the physical world. Okay, now if you can do that real well and hang out in point consciousness, well, you got the focus down. But then living from living out of your being level, being authentic, that's something that probably is even harder than, it's getting out of your mind. It's harder for Westerners to do that because we're taught from the beginning that our heads are what's important. Our emotions can't be trusted. Our intuition can't be trusted, and you have to live out of your head. You better be aware of what's going on, why it's going on, and make the right decisions and choices out of your intellect. Otherwise, you're in trouble. So we discount all those other things. So as long as you live out of your head and you don't really know who you are, you're living a sham. You're living a fantasy. You're living, what should we say, an image. You've got an image. Your culture's told you how you should be, what you should say when somebody says this to you. When somebody says, well, how you doing? You go, okay. Or you ask somebody, well, how's your day today? But you don't really care how their day is. You just say that because that's how we are polite to each other, even though we don't care. So that's the sham I'm talking about. We live in a world where civilization is thin veneer over what's really there. Whenever you see a bunch of people who are terrified, that thin veneer of civilization comes off and you end up with a bunch of animals, and you often end up with a bunch of fascists, people who will walk over anybody to get to where they think they need to be. Suddenly it's all about force and who can force their way to get what they want for themselves and whoever are attached to them. So then it becomes the kind of the law of the jungle. Okay, right. So we live in a place with a very thin veneer of civilization, and most of that is out of our head. Something we're taught, something we learn how to be nice and how to be polite and how to smile even if we're unhappy and how to laugh even if we just had our feelings hurt, and we learn all that kind of stuff, but it's all inauthentic. It's not who we are. And if you are not authentic and you're trying to manifest stuff, well, you're just not going to be very good at it. You're working out of your head. You're not working out of your power. So once you understand the basics, then all of the rest of this stuff, from magic to remote viewing to healing with your mind to traveling around into, you know, other places, other dimensions, all of that stuff becomes trivially easy. And, you know, it's just not a problem. The reason it's a problem is because people have very noisy minds and they do not live out of their being level. And if there was some magic that threw them in their being level, they'd be terrified. Their being level is such a mess of fear and other sorts of junk that if they were in their being level, it would be like a nightmare. So that's why they keep that being level out of sight. That's why you have a subconscious, because you don't want to deal with that being level. That's why you clear out your fears first. You get rid of that fear. You get rid of that ego and all of those beliefs. Then that being level starts to be a nice person, starts to be the core of you. It's an authentic being. And from there, that's where all your power is. You see?
I got you. Okay.
So that's how that falls out.
Wow, pretty intense stuff there, guys. We got to take a break. We'll be right back here with Thomas Campbell. We're going to get into some quantum physics stuff too as well. But it's never always remember that the being level. I remember John Anthony West talking to me about that as well too. We'll be right back after this break with more from Thomas Campbell right after these messages.
This is Cortana from Shift Happens, telling you to pour a glass and park your ass, because you're listening to KTLK, The Fringe FM. Shifthead.
How you doing today, guys? This is Garrett Lee.
And this is Randy Warner.
We're the hosts of Healers and Hellraisers, and you're listening to The Fringe FM.
Live for 3 hours every Saturday night. It's a show that engages the mind, makes you think, and maybe even challenge what you think you know. Hi, I'm Jeremy Scott of Into the Paranormal, where we talk about topics that are anything but mainstream, somewhere between abnormal and paranormal. Bring an open mind and join us for Into the Paranormal, live Saturdays at 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern on the Fringe FM.
From birth, we have been conditioned to conform to what is normal, conditioned to adhere to authority, and conditioned to repeat what has been told to us as truth. I'm Ryan Gable, and here at The Secret Teachings Radio, I've interviewed hundreds of great guests and done extensive unique research into subjects that span from the paranormal and the occult to health, philosophy, and history. I personally have no affiliations or agenda, except to use objective critical thinking in my analysis of every subject discussed, to empower myself with information and hopefully allow you to do the same. If you want to join me, tune into The Secret Teachings radio broadcast, airing live Monday through Friday from midnight to 3 a.m. U.S. Pacific Standard Time on the Fringe FM. For more information, you can visit our website at www.thesecretteachings.info or email me at rdgable@yahoo.com.
Reclaim your active lifestyle with Angioprim. Angioprim is the original liquid oral chelation supplement. Chelation helps remove toxins, heavy metals, and cholesterol in your veins and arteries that can cause blockages. Scientific research proves the active ingredient in Angioprim has superior oral chelation action that helps promote cardiovascular health. Find out more. Go to angioprim.com. Talk to a trained consultant by calling Angioprim toll-free 877-882-7221.
Hey, it's Grace. Can we talk about something serious for a minute? Your age. Getting old has its perks. But remember, being a few years younger You know, your hair was thicker, you didn't have so many wrinkles, that extra weight wasn't haunting you, and you just felt better. Well, we can't turn back the clocks and go back 10 or 15 years, but you can start feeling and looking 10 or 15 years younger with Nature's Youth RSF. It's a doctor-formulated daily supplement that helps your body maintain its peak performance and fight the aging process. Imagine sleeping better, looking better, and feeling better. See how Nature's Youth RSF has helped thousands of people just like you at nature'syouth.com. nature'syouth.com. Imagine how it will feel when your family and friends are asking you what you did to look so good. Your secret will be Nature's Youth RSF. It's time to start looking better and feeling better. Learn more and order your Nature's Youth RSF at nature'syouth.com. That's nature'syouth.com. That's nature'syouth.com.
So, you love talk radio? Then you'll love TalkStreamLive.com. TalkStream Live is always on, 24/7 with the best streaming talk shows. Find your favorite talkers and discover some new ones. It's free, readily available online or on mobile with any smartphone or tablet. Finding your favorite talk shows all in one place has gotten a whole lot easier. Just go to TalkStreamLive.com. Be sure to download the free apps from Google Play or the iTunes App Store.
Want to know what's on The Fringe FM? Check out our schedule at thefringe.fm. Hey, Fringe FM listeners. Did you know that when you're on the road with limited data or no Wi-Fi available, you can still listen to every minute of The Fringe FM by calling 701-719-3971. No smartphone app or internet needed. Saves your data plan and no extra cost if you have unlimited minutes. Call 701-719-3971. That's 701-719-3971. Listen to The Fringe FM on any phone, anytime, anywhere. Welcome back to Lighting the Void. We are here with Thomas Campbell from mybigtoe.com, NASA physicist, author, and speaker. And it's been a real pleasure listening and learning from this man. And before the break, Tom was talking about our authentic self, being authentic and our core self. And I think that that message has been shown to us in a lot of ways, whether it's through movies or whatever. I mean, I know you guys know the Legend of Bagger Vance, that movie. That's what it made me think of. And so, just real quick, I'm going to play this if you do remember this.
If inside each and every one of us is one true, authentic swing, something we was born with, something that's ours and ours alone, something can't be taught to you or learned, something that got to be remembered. You know, over time, the world can rob us of that swing. It get buried inside us under all our wouldas and couldas and shouldas. Some folk even forget what their swing was like. Some folk even forget what their swing was like. You keep swinging.
But I don't have any balls.
And don't worry about hitting the ball or where it's gonna go. Just swing the club. Feel the club. Come on, close your eyes.
Close my...
Yeah, you can't make that ball go in that hole. You got to let it. I want you to feel the club rolling off your club. Feel the weight of the club. Sailing on the perfect line, dropping into that night, soft as butter. Listen to the sounds of the night. Just keep swinging that club till you gotta breathe. Inside each and every one of us is one rustling true, authentic swing. Just keep swinging that club till authentic swing. You're part of the whole thing. Something we was born with. Take a deep breath. That's a good thing. Listen to the sounds of the night.
I don't feel a thing.
Just keep swinging that club till you're part of the whole thing. That's a good thing. Can you see it?
We're going to continue this interview, and I wanted to speak about some science exclusively, like quantum entanglement, because we were talking about that the other night. So I did want to ask about quantum mechanics a little bit. I understand some of it, like the Einstein-Podolsky-Rosen paradox that demonstrated, I guess, the principle of non-locality, which is kind of what they're doing with, I guess, particles now and stuff. But, the idea that distant objects can have a direct, instantaneous influence on one another, right?
Mm-hmm.
So...
Entanglement, basically.
And it entangles at non-locality, meaning... What I'm getting at is, how come if I travel to, I could travel to Mars or whatever in this, and it's so real or in my mind, but in seconds, I say less than the speed of light or faster than the speed of light, I can wake up. There's no distance. It's almost like it doesn't exist.
There is no distance outside of this physical. The distance is just part of the physical reality. It's computed. You know how you make space? If you ask a traditional physicist where space comes from, he won't have a clue. You ask him where time comes from, he won't have a clue either. You ask him where mass comes from and charge comes from, and they won't have a clue about any of that. Physicists have no idea where all the basic pieces of their science even come from. They just mysteriously exist because they do. You see? Well, if you look at it from a virtual reality perspective, you can see where all of it comes from. It's all computed. It's part of the rule set. How do you make space? You put a point someplace, pick a point anywhere, and then put 3 unit vectors that are perpendicular to each other, 3 orthogonal unit vectors, starting at that point. That's it. That's a 3-dimensional space. By unit vectors, I'm basically, make this into non-math speak. You take a point and you put an X, Y, and Z axis through that point. And now you have space defined. That's all space is. It's a calculation. It's not a fundamental thing in itself. It's a calculated thing. You see? So that is
I'm trying to understand this microtubule thing. I don't know if you know what I'm talking about, but I think it's just a theory. I think it's just a theory in quantum mechanics, a theory of consciousness that some people have put out because they're trying to explain how these things, like how can a shaman go on a journey and then instantaneously come back faster than the speed of light, and they're trying to put words to it.
Yeah, well, the thing with the microtubules is trying to make consciousness from a physical source. That's materialists trying to solve the hard problem, which they can't do. Yeah, and they're doing and it's not very credible at all. What they have done is they say, within consciousness, you have things that are non-local. Within quantum mechanics, you have things that are non-local. Therefore, consciousness must be an artifact of quantum mechanics, because quantum mechanics is the only thing we know that's non-local, and so is consciousness. And because this is a material reality, consciousness has to be created with quantum mechanics. Well, quantum mechanics and microtubules, the fact that they're micro and very small where quantum mechanics plays, that's what they're trying to do. So they come up with this microtubules just to create some kind of quantum system that will then create consciousness. Well, that is very bad logic. Just because they have one thing in common doesn't mean that one causes the other. Rocket ships fly and birds fly. Therefore, birds must be little rocket ships. You see? That's poor logic. They have something in common. They both fly, but it doesn't make one of them the cause of the other. See, that's kind of a bad idea. So the microtubules is a way of creating, consciousness, and it doesn't work, and they're not going to get anywhere with it because it doesn't really work that way. All they can do is say quantum mechanics must be at the root, and therefore some quantum system is responsible for consciousness. And that's as far as they'll get, which is basically a statement of where they'd like to go, but there isn't going to be any logic to take them from some place that we know to that place that they want to go. So that's what that's about. As far as entanglement goes, it's a simple thing. Entanglement is an if-then statement. If this, then that. If spin up, then spin down. A spin-up, spin-down pair, an entangled pair, is a single system. It's a one thing. And in that single system, There's an if-then statement that says if one of them spin up, the other one spin down, and that's because you need a spin up and spin down for the conservation of angular momentum. And that's why when a particle suddenly, when a bunch of energy creates two entangled particles, that's why it has to have the same amount of angular momentum and linear momentum that you had before in that energy. Has to have the same. You see, there's conservations of energy. Total energy has to be the same as well. So that's a single system based on conservation laws, and it's easy to produce in an if-then statement in a computer code. So that's what's basically going on there. Those are people trying very hard to maintain a materialist view of the world, even when consciousness and quantum mechanics both defy materialism. And just claiming that, well, they both defy it, then one must be the cause of the other is not even logic.
Well, they started talking about the holographic universe, and then it explained it, and I was with them on that one, and then they got into the microtubule thing, which kind of went back to a physical explanation of a holographic universe, which didn't really make sense to me to begin with. So they lost me there.
Right, it doesn't make any sense, and that's because they're just waving their hands. There isn't any logic there. The holographic universe is really not a very good metaphor. Some of the things they say are interesting, but again, they're trying to push physics into spaces. They're trying to push a materialist physics into spaces where it can't play. And the metaphors are unfortunate. It's not a hologram. We know what a hologram is. It's a interference pattern that if you shine light back through the interference pattern, the light will manifest in the source. You'll have a little ball of light that looks like the source. Mm-hmm. So you start with the source and you put laser lights on it from different directions. That the laser light bounces off the source from those different directions, creates an interference pattern on a piece of film. Now, you take that film and shine laser light back through it again, and you'll see the source, whatever it is, a child's ABC block or a picture of, a little statue or whatever you'll see. Now you'll see it as light because the light will goes back, back and forth. Either way, it works. Whether you make the diffraction pattern with the laser light or send the laser light back through the diffraction pattern and make a little ball of light there that's in the pattern of the source. That's what we have, and that is not what's going on in the universe. This is not a holographic universe. But what they meant by that is that the universe seems to have pattern to it, and it seems that the pieces of it contain all the information in the whole. Yeah. And that's the way, because of that idea, that is the way that they've come up with this idea. Well, it must be a hologram then, even though that's nonsense. It's nobody shining a laser light through a diffraction pattern to create this 3D reality. When you make a hologram, that light that makes that image of that chess piece, you can move your finger right through it, right? It's not a solid object. It's just light. It's not a holographic universe. They're using holograph as a metaphor, gotcha. Not as a fact.
Not as a real hologram, but just as a metaphor.
It's just a metaphor for something we don't understand that's really cool, and it seems like that pieces of it will have all the information of the whole. Well, there's something else that has that same quality, where the pieces contain all the information of the whole. And it is fundamental in our reality, and it's called a fractal.
Gotcha.
Okay. And yes, this is a fractal reality. And yes, there's a thing I created, a concept that I created is called a process fractal rather than a geometric fractal. And a process fractal is a process that the output then gets turned around and feeds back into the input. And when you take an output and feed it into an input like that, you create a process fractal. And that's what evolution is. Evolution is a process fractal. That's how you can start with something simple like a cell or a couple of cells, and 200 million years later, you've got the planet Earth with all the bushes and plants and snails and humans and antelope and monkeys and everything else on it. just from that cell evolving. You see? That's what fractals do. They start with simple things, they keep iterating, and they build up these huge, detailed things. It's a fractal process. So that's why they call it, this idea that it's laser light shining through a diffraction pattern is silly. That makes no sense whatsoever. Well,
Right.
It's a metaphor. What's it a metaphor for? Well, if they really knew, they wouldn't have had to use a metaphor like that.
Right. I get what you're saying.
They wouldn't have had to use a very general, non-specific, doesn't make any sense metaphor.
Uh-huh.
Okay? They could use something that was a little better. Well, because they use a very generic kind of doesn't make a whole lot of sense metaphor, tells you that they don't really have a clue. It just sounds good because they know that just the physical reality by itself doesn't play. Everybody in physics knows that, even though a lot of them don't admit it. So they're coming up with these bizarre ideas to try to make it play. Well, yes, if you talk about distance, there is no distance outside of this virtual reality. Distance is created. Once you get into the consciousness space, there is no distance. There is no place. That's a 3D. That's a geometric construction. You see, and now you say, well, then I can't visualize it. Well, no, you can't. You know, you're a 3D person and you have all your experiences 3D, and you can't visualize or think about anything that isn't 3D because that's your whole experience base. But you can deal with abstract thoughts and abstract relationships. So you can actually work out the answers even though you're stuck in the 3D world. It's just they're abstract. You end up with a metaphor. It's another metaphor that I call the larger consciousness system.
Gotcha. Now, all of this stuff you talk about, because I've got all three of your books. I'm taking it in as slow as possible, to be honest with you. But I have them for life now, all three of them. Mm-hmm. Does your books, the My Big Toe series, do they encapsulate pretty much everything that you're trying to teach us, or is there more outside of that?
Well, the books themselves, give a really good overview of the basic theory. Yes, they do that. And the thing that you'll find elsewhere, mainly on YouTube, is the more science aspects of it, the applications. Okay, you have theory, and from that theory you have, millions of logical consequences. So that's like you take Newton's laws, right? That aren't laws. Take those equations, and you got like 4 or 5 equations, and they're not even real big equations. And the logical consequences of those equations are almost every physical thing that happens in the macro world. Okay?
Gotcha.
Things that you wouldn't necessarily say, well, okay, no two things are in the same place. Well, yeah, okay, any idiot could figure that out. He wasn't that smart. Even I could have figured that out. Well, there are logical consequences to that. And it's not just a simple statement, but there's logical consequences. So the books, the 3 books, will give you the basic theory. Now, a lot of the logical consequences of that theory have been talked about in the videos. And science, physics, is one of the logical consequences of that theory. That you can end up saying why C is a constant and why quantum mechanics have to be, in terms of probability distributions. It's not that that there's no other logical choice. That's what they have to be. Okay. And these are just logical things that fall out of the bigger theory. So the bigger theory is there in the books. YouTube will give you a lot more of the logical consequences and develop more of the science, more of the application. People say, well, how do I apply this to my life? All right, here I am, I'm this and that. I'm stuck in a job I don't like. My life isn't very happy. I have a terrible relationship. What's wrong? What do I need to fix? Well, then you can tell them, according to MBT theory, you can just write a very short list of here's what you have to fix. Here's what's wrong. So it affects people's lives. And that discussion, obviously, if you just say, well, here's a list, that's done. Next, it's not going to help that person very much. They walk off with a list. You have to discuss it. You have to explain. You have to get them to the point where they can actually see what it is you're talking about. Paradigm shifts are never easy. So a lot of the YouTube is in this explanation, deriving logical consequences and explaining to people in ways that they can understand what these principles mean to their everyday life. So that's what else is out there. So for most people, the books are good and it gives them a good foundation. And after that, the YouTube videos kind of fill in the details for them.
But you've got a mass amount of information on those YouTube channels. I really recommend anybody that's listening to go there. You make so much sense with all this stuff. It's just, I wonder sometimes why somebody like you or maybe Robert Monroe could easily do it. It just happened to him. Like, they didn't even know what was happening. Robert didn't know what was happening to him.
No, he did not, and he had no idea about what it all meant. He thought, when he went out of body, he thought he was going to a place that existed there, independent of him, his mind, his intent, and his interpretation. He thought that it was like that. So he goes out to his park, or he goes meets somebody and does something, and for him, all of that was like another physical reality that just isn't physical. And it's not like that. But he didn't know that. He knew as much as he could know. And he was a good reporter. He didn't embellish. Mm-hmm. He tended to say just what it was he got. But he was forced to interpret, because everybody has to interpret the data. If they're going to tell it to somebody else, you have to interpret it. Even if they're going to think about it themselves, you interpret it. Your interpretation sticks you with your own knowledge base, your own experience base. So he'd interpret in terms of the things he knew,
right?
The things he believed. So but he did a good job. So yeah, it just happened to him. Why did it happen to him? Because the world was ready for a set of 3 books that would introduce them to a larger reality.
I was always wondering that, like, why did it just happen to him and I have to really try or do some methods that you taught me or someone else taught me to try to do these things, and he would just lay down and bam, he's out doing all these things, and I'm extremely jealous, to be honest with you. This just happens to some people, not just Robert Monroe, but well, I never asked, did I ask you this? Did this just happen to you, or did he teach you how to do these things? I don't know if I ever asked you that.
Yeah, well, if you have you read book 1 yet?
Yeah, I read book 1, but it's been a while, so that question I can figure out on my own, pretty much.
Well, book 1 will tell you that, and I can tell you even more than that. That I had experiences of I had entities come teach me how to get out of body when I was like 5, 6, 7 years old, and so it happened to me like that too. I didn't ask for it; it just happened. But then that got turned off, and it wasn't until I'm now in my middle to late 20s that I run into Bob Monroe, and I start doing it from that viewpoint. So yes, I had it. It did just happen to me naturally, but not in a continuous way the way it did with Bob. Although some of the very same things that I did when I was, let's say, 7 years old were experiences that Bob had as well as an adult. Because when I was out of body then, I was an adult. I wasn't a child anymore.
Right.
So that's kind of strange. But then when I was with Bob, everything came back pretty quickly, and I was a very fast study. First time I tried to meditate, I was immensely successful with it. So I've been probably working on getting ready and whatever for this sort of thing for multiple lifetimes, not just this one. So yes, I've always been a very fast study in these sorts of things. Things come natural to me.
That's for sure. Because the last time I interviewed you, we were on video, and you. During the break, I came back, I got a drink, I came back, and you were just leaned back with your eyes shut. And I thought, well, maybe he's tired. Maybe he's taking a nap. And you kind of heard me, and you was like, no, I'm here. I just choose to go other places when I want to. Something of that nature is what you said. Like you could just travel. And yes. I've always been extremely jealous of that, and I would love to go on one of these immersions. I've actually been invited to one, and I hope I can go. Do you try to help people learn how to do that on these immersions that you do?
Yes, that's the point, helping them get personal access to the larger consciousness system.
That's amazing stuff. And I just, what I was saying when it got disconnected is I think last time you told me the reason why I couldn't do these things and other things happened, it just happened naturally to, I guess, certain people, and people like me couldn't really do them the way you guys could, is because of our paradigm, our fears and our expectations, and we had to let go of all that. Is that right?
Pretty much. That's right. And it takes a long time to let go of all that. Yes. That's pretty much it.
It seems to me, though, that the experience I had when I did go out of body, that I could see what was really happening. And then I've had other experiences where it was in a dream. It's like a dreamlike state. Mm-hmm. One is way more vivid. The colors were brighter, the edges were sharper. There was almost some kind of hum. And in that state I was in the physical, like I saw things that were happening. I verified it through my notebooks. Mm-hmm. And then other things that I've done were just wacky dreams. And everyone keeps telling me, well, you're in the same place, really. You just don't know it. But it feels like layers to me. Is that my mind, or is that an actual structure?
Yeah, no, there are layers, but it's not structure like you think. Your reality is your interpretation of a data stream that you're receiving from the virtual reality server. Okay, so you're a player. You get a data stream from the server, the rendering engine, if you like, for the virtual reality, and you interpret that data as this reality. All right. If you let go of this reality, you let go of all your sense data to where you're no longer processing sense data, you can get hold of or be given another data stream. And that other data stream then becomes a different reality for you.
Gotcha.
Okay? So there are multiple realities. These are really multiple data streams. Now, why do you get one kind one time and a different time the next? It depends on you, pretty much. It depends on what you bring to the table. It depends how quiet your mind is. It depends how settled you are emotionally, what level of fear that you have. It also depends on what the system would like to teach you or what it thinks you can learn. So the very first one, or some of the initial ones, often tend to be really the best ones because they're perfectly clear. The system is just letting you see what it's like to be aware of this physical reality from a viewpoint of consciousness. And then that's that perfectly clear, amazing place. Then you looked around and you saw things that you could check out later. And that was meant, the reason you saw those things, or those things came to your attention, you could check them out later. The system wanted to give you an experience where you could verify it for yourself that it was real and not just in your imagination. Therefore, they give you something that you will see, that you can check out, that otherwise you couldn't have known. So that's what happens. Now, next time, you could maybe repeat that process 2 or 3 times till you got good at it, or you may not need to repeat that process, or you may just have taken that information and got real enthusiastic about seeing stuff and be able to look here and there and remote viewing or whatever, but missed the bigger point about growing up and bigger reality and that sort of thing. Who knows? But the next time you go up, and maybe it's just the point that your mind's in, the attitude that you have then. You have expectations. The expectations get in the way. Expectations are beliefs. So they get in the way. So now you have a hard time having it again because the first one you have is getting in the way. You can't just relax and let it happen anymore. You want it to happen the way it was that time. And that could be the problem why you're not so successful this time. So that happens a lot. You know, it's, again, if you get clear of all the fear and the beliefs and the ego, then things get a lot easier. Trying to push through it with those things intact, you can do with enough practice, but it's just a lot harder way to go.
I wonder if that's why I got shoved back in my body. That one time I was doing a method that I'd learned and I from somebody else, and I felt the vibration. So I was doing the whole roll out of your body type thing, right? Right. And I knew when the vibrations hit that I just needed to relax for a little bit and then move. Well, I couldn't move. It felt like I was stuck in a shell. And I'd said some type of command, like, I command you to release me by life and light. But my voice sounded like James Earl Jones when I said it. It was really weird. And these little, they look like Rorschach things, little blobs, immediately just came down and just kind of shoved me back in, like held me from getting out. And I woke up and I was like, what is that? And for every time I tell that story, psychics or mystics, they'll tell me that these are my guides that are saying I'm not ready and this and that. And I find that so hard to believe because I feel like I'm ready. I want to do this, you know?
Yeah. Well, what they're trying to do is come up with plausible reasons. And there could be a lot of different reasons besides that it's your guides trying to push you back in. And then why did your guides turn into Rorschach test blobs and that sort of thing? You know, that doesn't really make any sense either. I would agree with that. That's probably not really what was going on, but it's probably true. Their interpretation's wrong, but the fundamental reason is probably still right. And that's that you weren't ready. You weren't ready in a sense that, not that you didn't want the experience and that you weren't ready to have it, but you weren't ready in the sense that your mind was quiet enough, that your ego was still and absent enough, and that you didn't have, you know, expectations or other things going on. What happened is you probably got too excited. You got those pulsations, and it's like, oh boy, okay, I got it now, you know, and your expectation level and your excitement goes up. Well, all that expectation, excitement is all in the intellect. So what that does is just brings you right out of the being level into the intellectual level, and then nothing happens. It just kind of fizzles. Well, when it fizzles, you have to do some kind of a, you know, you get some sort of data, and the information you got, it isn't working, you know, and it's true that you weren't ready, but not that you weren't ready by desire. You weren't ready by then because you were in the intellectual part of yourself, not in the being level part. At least this would be my first guess at it.
Yeah. I wanted out so bad I was trying to force it, you know, like.
Right. Exactly. That's the thing. And when you do that, then you break it. And as you break it, you had the sense of falling back away from it. Like you weren't on the edge anymore. You were getting farther and farther away from the edge. And you interpret that as, you know, being, because you really want to do it, but you're getting further away from the edge. That means something must be prohibiting you or pushing you away. So then you manifest something that's pushing you back. And why little ink blots? Well, you know, that's
who knows, right?
Who knows? Yeah. You know, you just needed something that was pushing you back, you know, and that was nondescript. Anything else would have taken more, you know, visual acuity to make up something. You know, if it was little green men with pointy ears were pushing you back, then you would have had to manifest all of that imagery. It's easier to just have a blob or a dark light or a feeling or a hand pushes you, you know, in the chest and pushes you back. That kind of stuff is common, and people are just making up something, whatever it is, that's keeping them from getting in and pushing them back. That's what it is they're interpreting that. And there's really nothing doing that. They just feel that there must be because they feel they're getting further and further away from it because they're getting more and more in their intellect. Therefore, something must be keeping them out. Therefore, they manifest something that is keeping them out. When you get into these states, what you think manifests very, very easily.
Gotcha. So my next question would be the human potential. You know, the set of laws that are, I guess, in the cosmos or whatever, that when we send out something that you were talking earlier, that it has to come back, I guess, maybe it's easier for it to come back a certain way. Like if I send out a manifestation and some type and it comes back through the natural laws of the universe type deal. Does that inquire, though, that as far as the human potential goes, that we can stretch the bounds of what we can do now physically? And I say that because there's this Rudolf Steiner and some other, I think it's 100 monkey theory or something like that, where once a human breaks some type of physical record, then the rest of the pack catches up. Like an impossibility becomes possible, but it has to be broken first. So where does that leave the human potential? Like what are we capable of, and are there any boundaries to that?
Well, the human potential is much, much, much greater than most people believe that it is, or understand that it is. Much greater. And the reason that somebody breaks a record and then after that all sorts of people will break it, that's because when the first person breaks it, that person basically destroys the myth that it can't be broken. It makes it possible. See, when things aren't possible, well, nobody will ever go faster than that, pedaling a bicycle or whatever it is. Then basically people feel like that's beyond them. They may try a couple of times, but, it doesn't work. And nobody really works really, really hard to try to do it because they figure that it's just not likely. Because this other person that did it, worked for 20 years, without stopping. And they finally got it. So nobody else really wants to put that time in. So you get kind of discouraged from it. So nobody else does it. And then somebody breaks it. And then suddenly all over the world there's, that can be broken. We can do that. And he didn't have to work that hard. He just had a smarter training technique or something. And then pretty soon everybody else is looking for smarter training techniques. And then that old record gets broken over and over again. So that's one thing. The fact that somebody breaks it increases the possibility, increases the probability of it being broken. So now it's easier to break if in a sense, because right. the probability of it being broken has gone up now because somebody broke it. So when the probability goes up, then that makes it a little easier for other people to break. It's another thing that is going on with it. But no, the potential of the consciousness is vast. You have all of the larger consciousness system as your world to explore and to interact with when you're aware of what it is you are. You're not stuck in this virtual reality, and eventually you don't even live in the virtual reality anymore, for that matter. You live in a reality that's bigger than that. You live in a reality that has some of the virtual reality data, like the physical data, but it also has other data that are non-physical, that are beyond the physical data. And all of that gets mixed together into one larger, bigger reality. So you kind of stop living here and start living in a much larger reality that has more dimensionality to it and more information. But that just happens as you grow up, as you get rid of your ego and your fear and your beliefs. You start living in a bigger and bigger space. The more of that junk you let go of, then the bigger your decision space is. So pretty much then when you interact with people, you're interacting with them in a physical and what they would call non-physical way, both. But from you, it's just one thing. You're not physical and non-physical and getting data from this source and that source. It's all there, all integrated, right, as you need it. You see, it's just a larger integrated reality frame. So you get to have a bigger frame. So instead of spending a half an hour trying to get out of body, it takes you, a tenth of a second or less to go someplace else. It's just a matter of having an intention, and there you are. So gotcha. It's just a different sort of being. But yes, there's a lot of potential. And yes, you can use your mind to heal and to remote view and to do all sorts of things. But the better and better you get at that, and the more that becomes just easily accessible to you, the less and less you really care about it. You're not all that interested in accessing it because you realize that everything is the way it is for a reason. The reason is everybody is the sum total of all the choices they've made. Right. So wherever you are, and however good or bad that is, that's your natural feedback. That's where all your choices have taken you. You're supposed to learn from that. You're supposed to grow from that knowledge and from that awareness that, I'm here. My life is miserable and unhappy because of all the choices I've made, because of who I am, because of the fear I have. And I'm the only one responsible for fixing it. So you have a different viewpoint than the viewpoint of, I hear I'm miserable. I'm miserable because this world sucks, because all the people take advantage of me, and because, the politicians are crooked and the bankers are crooked, and that's why I'm so miserable. It's this place just sucks. So you take no responsibility for yourself. You blame everything on everybody else except yourself, and you never change. You're still going to be miserable tomorrow because you're not changing anything that's important. All you're doing is absolving yourself from any responsibility, and everything continues the way it is. So it's when you live in a bigger reality, you just get this information. So let's say somebody walks up to me and they say, Tom, my Aunt Susie just, fell out the third store window, and, she's in critical condition, and I want to know if there's anything you can do to help her. Well, when he first told me about Aunt Susie, as soon as he said Aunt Susie, I already had Aunt Susie up. I was getting data on Aunt Susie and how Aunt Susie was and what her choices have been and where she is and what her life is like and the fall and all that kind of stuff. So as he's talking to me, I get information from multiple sources. Just anything that's pertinent then just comes because it's pertinent, not because I go out and search for it, but because it's pertinent, it just becomes part of my reality. So that's what I mean by saying this is an example of how you live in a bigger reality. So it's not that you're here or there, or that even you can go here and there quickly, but eventually it all just melds and you live in a space that's bigger than 3 dimensions. And it's just a natural, everyday kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And that is not just me. I'm sure there are other people that, have the same experience. But that's the way it is as you get rid of fear.
Earlier you were talking about love, like you wanted to make the world a better place by letting people know the potentials and how consciousness really works. What is your theory, or what you found to be, as far as I guess you could say spiritually goes, the concept of God? Anytime someone's asked this question, even the Buddha said, you're asking me a question that, it's kind of a waste of time to ask because I can't answer that. I can't comprehend it. Is it really beyond our comprehension to realize why we're here?
No, not at all. It's not beyond our comprehension. The why we're here is to grow up, is to become love, is to lower the entropy of ourselves and of the system. That's how the system survives. That's what any information system, any self-aware information system, that's what it has to do. That's, again, that's just the logical necessity for an information system. So you know why you're here. The God question is very interesting. And I asked a couple of people, and you'll find it in one of my talks from Atlanta that I was giving, Atlanta, Georgia. And it was being given in the basement, kind of a recreational area, big area down there in a Unity Church, North Alabama Unity Church. And that was just the venue that we had picked to, have a talk. And I had 2 theologians in the audience, both of them, I think, from that church. So I took the opportunity to ask them. I kind of put them on the spot without warning. But I asked them, I said, guys, you're theologians. God is your business. You've been through all the academic training about theology. Can you just tell me what are the attributes of God? Now, I don't want any sectarian kind of thing, and I don't want any dogma, that kind of stuff. I don't want it to be sectarian. What are the general attributes of God? So they sat chatting with each other quietly for maybe as long as 5 minutes while the audience and I waited. They came up with a list, and I had no idea what was going to be on the list. But what I wanted to do was compare that list with the attributes of the larger consciousness system. So they came up with their list, and they read off maybe 5 or 6 things, and every one of them was an attribute of the larger consciousness system. Now, the larger consciousness system is not infinite, it is not perfect, and it is not done. It's still evolving. It's still in self-creation. So that doesn't fit most people's ideas of a God, which is a done, fixed, perfect, infinite thing. But all the attributes are basically the same. So if you want to know what is God, I would say that a very good model for God would be the larger consciousness system. So I don't know what your Buddhist might have told you or not, but that would be a kind of a more definitive answer. That's the source, right? The larger conscious system is the source of everything else. We are pieces of that larger consciousness system. Okay, so we're kind of chunks off the old block, but limited chunks. That larger consciousness system realized that as a system with all the individuated units of consciousness milling around, communicating with each other, we weren't evolving very much. We weren't becoming love. We weren't becoming more kind or caring. We're kind of stuck, that we needed a virtual reality that was more than just communication protocols, so we could chit-chat with each other. So it evolved a virtual reality for us to do that in. It took the way you start any simulation that you want to evolve starts the same way. And again, there's no other way to start it. This is just the logic. You start with initial conditions and a rule set. When you push the run button, the initial conditions start to change according to the rule set. Okay, now for us, the initial conditions were a ball of plasma in a tight ball, high temperature, high pressure, and then the rule set was what we call science. Scientists dig out the rules that are in the rule set of our virtual reality. That's what science is all about, trying to discover the rules in the rule set.
Gotcha.
So that's the big digital bang. That's what created then this virtual reality we call our physical universe. So now you ask a physicist and you say, well, where'd that ball of plasma come from, since the universe hasn't been created yet?
Right.
It's created from that ball of plasma. And you say that all reality is physical reality. There's only this physical universe and nothing else. But where'd the ball of plasma come from that had to be outside of our universe in order for our universe to generate from it? And of course, they can't answer that. You see, just like where does time, mass, charge, and space come from? And they can't answer that. You see, with a virtual reality concept, all of those answers just fall out trivially. It's not like you have 10 pages of math to get them. They're just there. It's just
so there definitely could be something behind the curtain then. We just don't know what it is, as far as what's before the plasma. Well,
what it is consciousness.
Right.
It's the larger consciousness system. Yes, that is the source. And that is the only thing that's fundamental, and everything else is virtual. So when your avatar dies here, you won't, your consciousness doesn't die, just like when your elf dies, you don't die. You just find yourself awake in some other virtual reality. And you end up then in the transition virtual reality, another virtual reality. When you go to sleep at night and you dream, you go to another virtual reality with a different rule set where you interact however you do. And it's there for a reason. You make choices in that dream reality, and by those choices, you evolve or de-evolve. It's just another reality frame for you to interact in. It's no less, no more inferior or superior than any other reality frame. They're all just virtual realities. Consciousness is the only thing that's fundamental. Okay, so that's the model. So if you want to know where God is in the model, it's the larger consciousness system, an imperfect, natural, not supernatural, natural system that is in the process of becoming and evolving. And it needs to lower its entropy to evolve. And we are part of its strategy for doing that.
So at the Monroe Institute, I've listened to a lot of those audios where they talked about certain people or beings were stuck after they died. When I say stuck, I guess I mean they didn't transition, or they just didn't know where to go, or what was happening there. And I think, was it their beliefs, or they're so stuck in this paradigm of reality that caused that?
Well, what happens is that that's kind of a thing to do in a lot of things. You can go to the Monroe Institute and take a course called Lifelines, where you go save the stuckies, very much like you just described, and other places, other organizations, other whatevers. They have a similar kind of thing, what's going on there, it isn't that it's so hard to make the transition and it needs people like us to go help them out. That is all that's set up is metaphorical. It's not actual that it happens that way. What it is another virtual reality where you get to retrieve or save or help lost souls. There are no lost souls other than the ones that are created by the computer for the virtual reality game. It's another game you play. It's like going from World of Warcraft and changing to The Sims or Sim Tower or some other virtual reality. Okay, here you are in this game, and this is the physical universe game, and you've got a wife and 2 kids and a car and a garage and a job and all of that in this reality. And then you go into a meditative state, you let go of this reality, and you take on the data stream from the virtual reality of saving the poor little souls. And now when you're in that virtual reality, there's all these souls that need to be saved, and they're just kind of all over the place. And you'll find one or spot one or be taken to one, and now your job is to exercise your empathy, your kindness, your understanding, in order to help some other being. So it's an exercise in growing up. It's a very good exercise to do, but it's an exercise in helping, in loving, in caring about other. Okay, because you have to be clever. You have to understand what the problem is, and then you have to try to sort that problem out. And all of this takes effort, and it's practice, and it's a good thing to do. So it's just another virtual reality that is set up for people to learn in. Now, don't take that as it's fake. Your dream reality is not fake. This physical reality that we walk around in is not fake. There is nothing more real than information. All of those virtual realities, the saving the souls, this physical reality, your dream reality, the transition reality, they're all equally real. Okay? It's just information. In every one of them, you're getting information and you're interpreting it to be a certain set of circumstances, and then you're dealing with those circumstances. And by the quality of your choices, you're either evolving or de-evolving the quality of your consciousness. That's what's going on. And it's nice to have multiple virtual realities, because then you get very different kinds of questions, very different kinds of choices that you have to make. Otherwise, if you're stuck in the same old set of choices, well, you don't learn so quickly that way. That's why we need the dream time. It's a whole different set of choices. And in the dream reality, our intellect has already shut down. So in the dream reality, that is our being level. The choices you make in a dream, not a lucid dream, but a regular dream, are right out of your being level. That's you. So if you make really bad choices in your dream sometimes, well, those are yours. That's the way you are. If you make really good choices, those are yours, and that's the way you are. So the same in this Retrieve Lost Souls reality is another virtual reality where you get to make choices, how you're going to approach a problem, what you're going to say, what needs to happen, the degree of empathy you have. Some people are really, really empathetic, and you know it, and some are just pretending to be empathetic because that's what they think they should do. And there's a world of difference between those two and between the results that you get. So you have to learn to become more real if you're going to be effective in that game. And it has to not all flow from your intellect. It has to come from a deeper place. So you see, they're just different virtual reality games, which you can log off of one, log on to the other, and play that game and learn from it. These are all trainers, virtual reality trainers for us to help, figure out how to lower our entropy by making good choices.
I'll get crucified by the audience if I don't ask this question. They all obviously want me to ask you the alien and ET question, but I think I've already been there with you on that one, on our last interview. But the question, can these realities intertwine? Like, let's say, for instance, you see the movie The Matrix, where you have beings that are doing things that you just impossible to do in this subset of rules. And, Morpheus says, well, rules are meant to be broken, and they're only based on your beliefs. Well, I don't want to go around believing this is a matrix, because you might have people jumping off bridges thinking they can fly, but
right.
Is it possible to intertwine the realities to where these rules can be broken? You know what? I think I'm just going to wait. Let's take a break, and then we'll come back and get the answer for that right now. We're here with Thomas Campbell. This is Lighting the Void. Guys, we'll be right back. You don't go anywhere. We'll be right back after these messages. The Fringe FM.
You're listening to Lighting the Void Radio.
How you doing today, guys? This is Garrett Lee.
And this is Randy Warner.
From the Healers and Hellraisers podcast.
A podcast about people.
You're going to hear stories from the enlightening to the frightening.
Told by those who lived it.
Listen right here on the Fringe FM.
Wednesdays at 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern. And on the Fringe Free-For-All, right here on the Fringe FM. Follow The Fringe FM on Facebook and Twitter at The Fringe FM. The Fringe FM loves hearing from you. Have a suggestion, comment, or question? We're all ears. Email talkback@thefringe.fm.
This is Cortana from Shift Happens, telling you to pour a glass and park your ass, because you're listening to KTLK, The Fringe FM. Shifthead.
You're listening to Lighting the Void Radio.
Hey, Fringe FM listeners. Did you know that when you're on the road with limited data or no Wi-Fi available, you can still listen to every minute of the Fringe FM by calling 701-719-3971. No smartphone, app, or internet needed. Saves your data plan and no extra cost if you have unlimited minutes. Call 701-719-3971. That's 701-719-3971. Listen to the Fringe FM on any phone, anytime, anywhere.
Rich Giordano here from the Paranormal Code. I'm now live Monday through Thursday at 10 p.m. Eastern, 7 Pacific on the Fringe FM. See you there.
Want to know what's on the Fringe FM? Check out our schedule at thefringe.fm.
Does your basement or crawl space have a damp, musty smell? Well, watch out! That's a sign of too much moisture and not enough ventilation. And that can mean increased mold growth and the buildup of harmful toxins and gases. Don't bother with a dehumidifier. It just circulates the same unhealthy air. Now there's a better way to remove these dangers and odors. It's with the computerized Wave Moisture Control Unit that reduces moisture and expels pollutants.
We replaced our old dehumidifier with the Wave unit, and in only 3 weeks, our basement is dry and the musty smell is gone.
Wave units require no maintenance, no buckets of water or filters, and costs only pennies a day to run. Breathe better, live healthier with an affordable, no-maintenance Wave unit. Call 888-717-WAVE, 888-717-WAVE, or visit dryhealthyhome.com. Dryhealthyhome.com.
Ride the wave. Wave Home Solutions for a healthy, comfortable home.
Lighting the Void is proud to announce Mind and Magic's Protection and Defense Course for protection from magical and psychic attacks. This is not a joke. Magic practitioners are on the rise, and with that comes attacks from baneful or black magicians that try to harm or hurt others for their own selfish reasons. If you are not a believer in psychic attacks, then this isn't for you. If you are, and you want the power to defend yourself and your family and home, that I highly suggest you grab Freighter Xavier's Protection and Defense course. In this course, you will learn how to tell if you are under attack from a natural source or if an individual is attacking you. The 4 forms of curses and attacks, how to remove self-imposed curses, the correct way to cleanse your home from negativity or malevolent entities, how to make your own holy water, what you should always keep near or under your bed, herbs that banish negativity and promote purity, the most powerful banishing rituals on the planet, and for those that seem to want to harm you the most, how to put your enemies in a hell pit of their own making. You can also learn protection against shadow people and other entities. Or are you just in a bad planetary alignment? Even how to get rid of an enemy using a tic-tac box. It does not matter what your faith or belief is, this will work. Click the banner on the website at lightingthevoid.com or go to lightingthevoid.com/Xavier.
Are you intrigued by Paranormal Talk Radio? You'll love the new Paranormal Radio app from TalkStream Live. You'll find a great selection of talk shows covering UFOs, ghosts, strange phenomena, and much more. Download the Paranormal Radio app now and start listening to the very best in paranormal talk entertainment, including the network you're listening to right now. The Paranormal Radio app, free in Google Play and the iOS App Store.
Welcome back to Lighting the Void. I'm your host, Joe Roop. Don't forget, tomorrow night on the program, we're going to be discussing real magic with Dean Radin. Dr. Dean Radin's going to be with us. So we're going to kind of continue this discussion as we move on and finish out the week. I want to say thanks to all of you guys in the chat room and the Spreaker chat for participating in this show. This has been a fascinating conversation with Thomas Campbell. And I want to give a shout out to Chad, too. You've been real active in the Fringe FM chat, so I got to give you a shout out for that. And I love all of you anyways. But before the break, we were discussing with Thomas about, or I'd asked about intertwining realities. And what I'm getting at really is, can we break the rules like it shows in the Matrix film? Can we do these types of things? Sometimes I find it hard to ask the question, but I'm pretty sure that Thomas knows what I'm talking about here. I'm almost certain.
Yes, to a certain extent, there is. But there are rules about breaking rules and how rules can be broken. So, the Matrix film was made to be dramatic and made to be sensational, all that sort of stuff. And real life tends to be more tedious than that. It tends to be actually wilder than fiction, but it tends to just be, not as dramatic all the time. Mm-hmm. So yes, you can break the rules. You said you had an out of body and you saw something that was, that was in the earth frame, and you checked it out, and sure enough, that was the thing you saw.
Right.
People remote view all the time. They go places, and it's not limited just to the earth. They go to the moon and to, Alpha Centauri and, whatever, 20 feet under the ground. They can do things in their remote viewing that takes them places other than just what they could see from this planet, and they get information. And if they're good at remote viewing, their information is correct most of the time. Now, that's another little side issue. Why is it only most of the time? That's because these things I told you before, their level of getting the intellect out of it, they only get their intellect out of it 80%. Well, they're only going to be right about 80%, you see. So anyway, yes, so these realities do interact. You've already interacted with it once, and all the remote viewers are interacting with it. When you heal somebody with your mind, you're interacting with this virtual reality. So there is interaction, but the interaction is not just you can do anything, that you want. Let's say we'll talk about manifesting things. Mm-hmm. You can't always manifest what you want. It's not that it's a thing that if you try hard enough to manifest it, you'll get it. What you're doing is you're modifying future probability. So if something started out with a probability of 1,000,000 to 1 to happen, but you really, really want it to happen, Well, if you're a real, 5-star wizard, you might be able to get that all the way down to 1,000 to 1. Wow, 1,000,000 to 1 to 1,000 1. You're really strong, being level, calm mind, and all the rest of it, but it's still unlikely to work because it's still 1,000 to 1, and it's probably just not going to happen. So you see, it depends what you manifest. First has to be manifestable from the probability situation. And then that manifestation will modify the probabilities in such a way to make that more likely. So let's say it was only a 60-40, 60 that it wouldn't happen and 40 that it would. Well, now you may take your mind and change it around the other way. Now you may make it 80-20, 80 that it will and only 20 that it won't. Well, that's not so big. It's not like orders of magnitude like you did before. But now if it's 80-20, you're likely for that to happen. You see what I mean? So you can't just get anything you want. Partly it depends on how much probability you have to move. How possible is it? Is it like almost impossible, or is it, sure, it's that could work. How
right.
That's
so
part
like
of
if
it.
I wanted to manifest a better job or an interview opportunity, that the universe could hand me that pretty easily.
Right.
But if I wanted to manifest, well, I want to walk outside my door and fly with no mechanism, I'm just going to fly.
Right.
That's probably
right.
not going to happen.
That's not going to happen. You see, it has to abide. You can't just break the rule set. For the same reason, the system can't break the rule set either, because we want this to be a consistent reality. So that's imposed on the larger consciousness system as well. You can't break the rule set like that if it causes a inconsistency in the reality. So you walk out of your house and call all your neighbors out and say, hey, neighbors, watch me. I'm going to fly today. And you put your hands together and point up and, take a little, push off the ground, and off you go. You go soaring around. Well, you have just broken the continuity, the logical continuity of the reality, because you've done something that's impossible according to the rule set. That creates problems. It's going to create all sorts of issues, not only for you and what's going to happen to your ego afterwards, which is dysfunctional, but also for everybody else. So let's say that instead of that, you go out at night at 3 o'clock in the morning and there isn't anybody around anywhere. Now you hold your hands together and give a little push off, and off you go. You start soaring. And you fly here and you fly there and you come back, half an hour later and walk back in your house and nobody saw anything. Have you created a conflict in the reality? No. Well, you haven't broken any rules then. You see, but will anybody believe you? No. So there's a thing that kind of encapsulates that, and it's called the psi uncertainty principle. And if you're reading the books, you'll get to it somewhere in the middle of book 2.
Okay.
That tells you kind of the rules for breaking the rules. You can break the rules, but you have to break the rules in a way that doesn't create a discontinuity in the reality for other people. You don't create any havoc. You don't. So that's kind of the rule for breaking the rules. But now the other thing still holds too. If you're going to do something, if you're going to change future probability to the extent that you can fly, well, that's probably impossible, because the probability of you being able to do that is so low. You're probably not going to raise that up. That's probably, 10 to the 50th, 1 in 10 to the 50th, that's not going to happen. So that would be a hard one to do, but not necessarily impossible, just very hard. You see? So that's the way those things work. So if you want to levitate a box of rocks, with you and a few friends, fine, you can do that if you all, or let's say make a table tip. They used to do in the seances back in the 1800s.
Right.
Get around a table and make the table kind of float up in the air and levitate the table and whatever. You can do that, but you can only do that when those few friends are around and probably the lights are a little dim and other things to obscure it with uncertainty. If you put the cameras on, turn all the lights on, and have all the major network press there to watch you levitate the box of rocks, a very high probability that the rocks will sit right there on the floor, even if you've levitated them 100 times before. because that would create a discontinuity in our reality.
Do other people's beliefs about that interfere with it as well? Like, if everybody's observing it, like say the world is observing it, then that has an effect on what happens as well too, because of their beliefs and.
Exactly.
Okay.
So if you have something that's 60-40, and it's a chance of 1 in 60 that it happens, and 1 in 40. It's 1 in 60 that it doesn't happen, and 1 in 40 that it does. Well, if you want to change that the other way around, that's just you. What if this event, a lot of other people would like to see it the way it is? They like it that way, or they like it even more. They want it to be, 80-20, so that it's only 1 in 80 that it gets the way you want it. Well, if there's a whole lot more of them that want it to be 80-20 than there are that want it to be, 40-60, then the 80-20s are going to win. Unless those other people moving it that way are stronger and have less noise in their mind and they work from their being level, then they may force their way on 100 other people who aren't really clear in their mind and work from their intellects. So you see, there's a lot of variables going on here. But yes, so you got a stadium full of people, and most of them want the home team to win, right?
Right.
They're rooting for the home team, and the team that's the away team, they only have 50 people in the stadium because it's expensive. They went 3,000 miles away in an airplane, and not a whole lot of their fans could do that. So they're playing with very few fans cheering for them. That's the home team advantage. Home teams were more likely to win on their home court than they are anywhere else because they have that advantage.
Oh, okay, I get that. Well, I only got a few minutes left here. I just wanted to make sure that I do want to say thank you for spending time with me, even though I was late. I really appreciate you doing this, so thank you for coming on the show.
You're welcome.
And then I guess my last thing to ask you would be is, what can we do to support you and to support this movement as a whole? What can me and my audience do for you?
Well, first of all, your audience should understand that if it's not their experience, it can't be their truth. So I don't want you or your audience to believe anything. See, belief is part of the problem. Remember, I say you got to get rid of your fear, your ego, and your beliefs. Well, the fear creates most of the ego and beliefs. So believing what I tell you is not significant. You have to find out for yourself. You have to do the things that you're doing. Go out of body, see if it's real or not. But you don't have to convince yourself 50 times. You only have to do it once to know that it's real. But whatever it takes for you. So have experiences, learn how to meditate, quiet your mind, work on getting rid of your fears. How do you work getting rid of a fear? If you ever feel something negative, if you feel upset, irritated, annoyed, angry, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, that's a fear. If you didn't have a fear, you wouldn't feel anything negative. Your life would be full of joy and peace and happiness. When you find something negative, trace it back to a fear. Work on it. Own it. Get rid of it with your intent. Okay, so that's what I'd have you do. Grow up. Get rid of your fear. Try to, it's about being kind. It's about other, not about self. As much as your life is about yourself, that's self-centeredness. That's fear-based. So that's what you do. And as you get this bigger picture, if you read over the stuff that's on my YouTube and you read things that are in my books, that'll give you a model in which you can place your own experience. But don't take my experience as the answer. My books and stuff in YouTube is just a model that can help you understand your own experience. Has to be your experience. So I'd say stop thinking that things that are wrong with your life are other people's fault. Take responsibility for your life. Get rid of your fear. And as you do, all these other things, the out-of-body, the being able to heal, manifest thing, all that becomes easier and easier and easier. So start at the beginning. Work on yourself. Get rid of your self-centeredness. Make it about other. That's what I would say. If you really want to get on this movement, you want to help humanity out, that's how you do it. You see, that's what's really wrong here. It's not that our institutions are evil, our politicians are evil, and our corporations are evil. Well, they might be that way, but they're not the cause. They are a symptom of the cause. The cause is us. We, humanity, have a very low quality of consciousness. All of these institutions and governments and economic systems we create. What we see out in the world is a good reflection of who and what we are. The only way to change it is to change ourselves. So that's what I'd tell you people. Take it seriously. You're a piece of consciousness. You're here for a purpose, and that's to evolve. And that evolution means being kinder, more caring, more loving, and getting rid of your fear. So if you want to get serious about any of this, then you will move from being part of the problem to part of the solution. And that's a good space to be in. So I hope that wasn't too much, but
oh no, that was great.
That's what you need.
And your website is My Big Toe. That's I guess that's a hyphen, isn't it? I don't want to say that wrong, but
yeah,
that's
You can do it with or without the hyphen.
Yeah,
my-big-toe.com, or if you just go mybigtoe.com, it'll still work as long as I pay the man who actually owns those words $10 a month.
I got you. Well, I hope
so. Either way.
I hope everybody continue. Oh, by the way, real quick, I wanted to ask the experiments that you're doing. Is this an ongoing thing? Like, do you plan on just keeping this going as long as it gets supported? Because if that's the case, that would be really cool too.
No, I don't think so, but I don't know yet. See, it depends on how they turn out. If they turn out that they work the way I think they will, then that will probably be the end for a while. We won't have to do a whole lot more. If they turn out not the way I think they were, then I'll have to think about it a little more and see where I may have made a poor assumption, and then I may redo them. A different set of experiments, different things. So I don't really know. It could be that this will just be the end, or it could be that more experiments will come out. But once these get announced, once they're done, if they turn out to be interesting, if they turn out to really do some of the things that I think they might, then that will be such big news that I won't have to do many more experiments. There will be physicists all over this planet trying to jump on that bandwagon, because what I will have just done is ripped up the foundation underneath quantum mechanics and all the rest of science, and that's going to attract a lot of attention. So there's going to be a lot of work being done in this area if these turn out. If they don't turn out the way I think, then most everybody but me will just forget about it and ignore them. And I'll get back to the drawing board and see what went wrong and see if I can't figure out a better set of experiments to do next time. So I'm hoping that once this thing gets started, it will become self-fulfilling in a sense. What we're trying to do here is really make this world a better place. And there are a lot of people who would like to put their money to something like that. So I'm thinking of philanthropists, people that have a few $100 million around they don't know what to do with.
Right.
They may want to chip into something that has a possibility to make this world a much better place. So I'm hoping to attract some philanthropic, is that right?
Yeah, philanthropic. That sounds right.
Philanthropic. Is that the right way to say that?
I think so.
Attention as it works, and if that's the case, I'd like to put together a center for the unification of science and consciousness, where I could then give out grants to scientists and to people who are working toward unifying science and consciousness. And it wouldn't just be my kind of work, or it'd be all sorts of people, in the neuroscience field, in the biological field, in the psychological field, all sorts of people who are working on the same problem, just from a different viewpoint, from a different, maybe even set of metaphors. It would be good to bring all that together and give it some publicity and get it up out of the basement of the university. Right now it's down in the smallest closet, in the last floor of the university, because it's the stuff that isn't popular. You don't trout that out in front of your public, because it's the kind of the butt end of the academic effort. Well, it should be the leading end. And I think some capital would maybe turn that around, and suddenly a lot of projects that are important and may really, develop good things for us could get a little sunshine and get a little funding and get a little publicity, and they could publish. We could start a journal for that center and so on. So That's one of the things I'd like to do long term, just as a legacy thing, to set something up where people can get out of the box. They don't have to just, salute to the dogmas and to the beliefs in their field. They can go outside the box. They can be daring. They can make mistakes. They can have big ideas. Something that would give that resources. Right now, if you're an independent thinker with big ideas, you get the small room in the bottom of the basement. That's not the place that academia finds valuable. Academia finds valuable what brings money to the door and what brings notoriety to the door. And they are stuck in their own, web of belief, and it's very hard for ideas and concepts to move forward. And we don't want that. We don't want to be stuck. We want to, get all this genius that we have around us and give it some light, give it some funding and some air and see where it takes us. And right now we don't have any institutions that do that. Institutions are very belief based. And if you don't carry the belief, then you're not welcome. So that would be something that would help turn the tide a little bit in the favor of the kind of the renegade, like myself, who doesn't just play in everybody else's sandbox, goes off and does out of the box thinking. Right. I think that's good. We need some of that. Now, sometimes you get out of the box thinking and it's just going to be garbage. Well, that's okay. You ought to be able to take risks and have it not turn out. That's not a bad thing. Right. But you need a place where they have the space to go try and see how things will work out.
Well, I want to thank you for your time. I appreciate you coming on the show. I'm a huge fan of yours, and I know a few of my listeners are really big fans of yours, and I really appreciate your time, and we'll do whatever we can to support your work. We'll always be talking about you and rooting for you, and just thank you all around. Thank you so much for what you do and for coming on the show. You're quite welcome, Joe. It's my pleasure to be here, and make sure you give me a shout and send something to Donna at mbtevents.com, because she puts stuff up on YouTube, and I'd like her to get the raw footage, if you don't mind, so that we put it in our library of my talks and can put it up on YouTube. That's a massive YouTube channel. Thank you so much, Thomas Campbell. Everybody, a fascinating interview that was. It's always it's a surreal experience. Most people say that you got to meet Thomas in person to really understand how humble he is, because he's super intelligent. And I think that as far as what's going on, I think Thomas, I don't want to blow too much smoke, but I think he's, probably one of the guys that's actually getting us somewhere in this field where we're trying to merge science and spirituality at all times. And, he just put $150,000 together really fast. So that tells me that a lot of people are wanting answers to this stuff too. And we still got 30 more minutes left on the program. We're doing a little recap. It's funny. I was asking people in the chat, what does his book, My Big Toe, what does toe stand for? And it took a few guesses, but I didn't know what it was either. It's My Big Theory of Everything. It's a 3-part book. You can get it on Audible. You can also grab it at Amazon. The links are going to be in the show notes too. But we'll be right back after these messages, guys. Don't go anywhere.
KTLK Digital Broadcasting, The Fringe FM. Nights on The Fringe FM just got even better. You wanted more live late-night programming?
Do it live!
Now you've got it. Don't miss The Paranormal Code with Rich Giordano at 7 p.m. Pacific, 10 p.m. Eastern.
Oh, yeah.
Followed by Lighting the Void with me, Joe Roop, at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern. There's something more to it. And bringing us home is Ryan Gable at midnight Pacific, 3 a.m. Eastern.
These secret teachings.
Live all night and the best of The Fringe FM all day.
This is Jason Lindgren from Crow 777 Radio, and you can hear us 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time every Saturday night here on The Fringe FM.
Follow The Fringe FM on Facebook and Twitter at The Fringe FM.
Hi, folks. CBD is the home run hitter for health right now. Why, you ask? Because of what it does for the body. Unfortunately, I can't tell you all about the benefit. You know, there's reasons. Do your due diligence and log on to ancientlifeoil.com. That's ancientlifeoil.com. Ancient Life Oil uses organic ingredients and is blended in coconut oil for some of the best benefits. Legal in 50 states and non-psychoactive. Log on to ancientlifeoil.com. That's ancientlifeoil.com.
Select Joe Roop at checkout at ancientlifeoil.com. Welcome back to Lighting the Void. I know that was a little short break, but I just had to get my brother Dan Lopez on the phone here. Dan, you're becoming a permanent co-host of this show. I'm starting to like it a little bit, actually. I don't want to hold you to it or anything, but what'd you think about that?
As long as the audience will have me, I'm more than willing to be here. But once they're like sick of me, that's it.
Yeah, well, I can always get somebody else on here, you know?
Exactly.
But yeah, that was the second interview I did with Thomas Campbell. I've done another one. It's actually on the archives, and we talked a little bit more about the out-of-body experience and some of the journeys I went on. Went in a little bit more detail about how to break free from all the barriers in your astral travels. So if you're interested in listening to more of that, there's a whole nother interview in there. And his YouTube channel, I mean, is full of stuff you can watch for life. It was actually one of our listeners, Ramon, who got me in touch with him. Ramon, just reached out to his agent, and that's how this whole thing happens by the listener. I'm telling you, it's amazing sometimes.
It is. Worked out great. I thought it was awesome.
Dennis mentioned in the chat room a man named Brian Cox, and I Google searched it real quick as a scientist over in the UK. I'd really like to get him on the show. That would be great. Do you know who Brian Cox is?
It rings a bell, but I don't. I've come across so many sources for consciousness ever since I got turned on to Sheldrake. It was pretty cool.
Did you catch that earlier? I said Rudolph Steiner, and I meant to say Sheldrake when I was talking about the goals. I do that stuff all the time. But
it happens.
This was
you're a real piece of consciousness.
Yeah, right. But if you think that, and I'm just going to come clean here, I don't know if you caught that at the beginning of the interview, but if you, every one of my shows are live, right? They're super live. But if you think that I was going to get Thomas Campbell to stay up past midnight, that wasn't happening. So that whole thing was pre-recorded. So it was a mix of me and the pre-recorded interview in there the whole time. But I've been chilling and hanging here with you guys the whole time. And I think I did pretty good. There was a couple of hiccups in there where you could tell. But I was like, maybe I should just let it go. Nah, it's pre-recorded. Everybody knows that.
I didn't catch it.
You didn't? I did good.
No, personally, I thought it was so threaded together. Well, I didn't expect it to be pre-recorded. So I wasn't looking for I wasn't looking for anything.
Well, I'm only
I learned a long time ago to do a show and have one in the hole just in case something happened. And something happened tonight. And I was going to do Thomas's Monday night, and something happened tonight. And I was like, you know what? The universe is calling. It's saying tonight's the night for Thomas Campbell. And hell, man, what a hell of a night. We've even had some interesting conversations going back and forth in the chat room. Everything about tonight is why I love doing this. I'm so happy and glad that it happened. Grateful.
It'll be another one in the can.
Another one in the can, for sure. I think people got some kicks out of the show we had on last night where I was talking about all that stuff, but with what my father made me do. But
I hear you. Let's not revisit that.
No.
But I had a question for you, because maybe you can answer this a little bit better for me. But what was putting consciousness to the test? What did that mean to you?
Putting consciousness to the test?
Yeah.
Well, basically, my big toe is a theory. It's his theory of consciousness. It's his theory of how everything works, based on the double slit experiment, based on the experiments that he did with Robert Monroe and all of the out-of-body journeys they took. And in Robert Monroe's book, his second book, where he talks about a scientist, he's talking about Thomas. That's who he's talking about. And so, not to mention this guy, I mean, I think he's done work for NASA. He works for the U.S. Missile Defense System. And he's got a lot on his plate, so he's constantly traveling around and teaching this stuff. But he's so into it that I think that he's on to something, And even after all of this, he still tells you, look, you read my books or whatever, but you still got to be authentic. And this is just one model. This is my theory. But it's a pretty damn good theory.
Right on.
So when he says he's
it
putting
is
it
a
to the
daily
test,
practice.
Those experiments that he's doing, he's supposed to send me what he actually sent off to get, I guess, accepted as experiments from other physicists. I really don't know how that works, but he said he would send it to me and what he actually sent out for the experiments. And when I get those, I can talk about it more. But it is to put this to the test, kind of like what the double slit experiment did. And so when he says
double slit experiment is pretty wild.
Right. So when he said he's putting consciousness to the test, then that's what he's doing, based on his theory of consciousness, Right. And that's why he was saying, well, if these things turn out that I'm right, because he has a theory about what's going to happen, if he's right, then it's going to really start working well, just like any other scientist. And then his main goal, really, and I did talk to him a little bit off air, was to get more scientists involved. I mean, there's a lot more scientists involved in consciousness and quantum study now than ever before. But his main goal is to bring it into the zeitgeist of normality, to where it'll actually become one of the biggest things we study, enough to where it changes the planet.
That would be nice. God knows the people on the planet could use a bit of changing.
Yeah. But it's almost kind of funny listening to somebody that's as humble as he is, intelligent.
Oh, yeah.
Tell me that we all need to grow up. I felt like my dad was talking to me, too.
Well,
grow up.
Growing up really just means policing your own thoughts, policing your own actions, policing your own behavior. It's really all it is. It's because that's all that part of letting go and being. Because when I've been there. It's an awesome place. It's one of the things that I was ready to take a look at and just say, I enter my ego when I go into the chat. When I pull out a chat, I'm engaging it from a completely different perspective, because I'll leave all opinions aside. You know what I'm saying? And I'll just take everything because how I always felt is that people say things, and the reason why they say things is because it's important to them. Otherwise, they wouldn't say it. And then so it comes now, and it needs to be expressed at the time that they need to express it. And it has absolutely no reflection upon me. But this is all a part of them letting me know what they're about, or a part of their thought process, or where they are at the moment. because it's always changing from moment to moment. So we're not always the same person today that we were yesterday, or who will we be tomorrow.
Thank
like
God.
our values are always changing. Sure. And as long as you're open-minded and stuff like that, forget about it. It's refreshing. It really is.
I guess I could open the phones up if anybody wants to call in. There was a whole bunch of questions in the chat room. I missed quite a few of them. It's 1-800-588-0335 if anybody wants to chime in on what Mr. Campbell was talking about. But, the first time I talked to him, we were talking about the barriers of astral travel. And, he said, well, let me give you an example. He said, so you have a preconceived notion or idea of what's going to happen when you go into these places. So if you go out into your yard and you see a white bunny or a white rabbit or something, no, he actually said a pink bunny. I'm sorry. You may, get scared or spooked or given to astonishment or just that doesn't make sense. I'm not going to mess with it. Instead of doing things from your being level and just going with it, and you'll find that that's a portal. And I was thinking, how can a pink bunny be a portal?
Anything can be.
But it is. It's something that doesn't belong there. It's trying to show you something, Mm-hmm. And when he started talking about doing things from a being level, that really hit home to me because I'm so caught up in doing this stuff from the intellect. When it comes to the occult, the books, the magic, astral travel, ufology, paranormal, I'm almost addicted to the intellectual aspect of it. But that being level is what I'm missing in a lot of this. And even when you study the occult, you'll find yourself going in a circle until you understand that there's a deeper soul aspect to it. It's not just about, like Robert Bonomo was talking about the other night, it's not just about knowing the symbols of alchemy and all this stuff. It's about knowing what part of you does that stuff represent.
Right.
The mystery to it, not just understanding it on an intellectual level,
Right.
John Anthony West sure had a hell of a way to talk about it. He called this, I really can't, I can't say it, but if you go back to the interview when I interviewed John Anthony West, there was a lot of cursing going on. You know how Jaws was, right? And I wasn't going to censor that show. Not with him.
He called it like it was.
But he did say the same thing after studying, the Gurdjieff work and things that taught him that the way he described it is we have the ability to use our heart, but we have the ability to use our brain, but we've lost the ability to think with our heart.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's what he was kind of talking about too.
I don't know. I thought Gurdjieff was really into the musical aspect of life and how it's really a concert to be written.
Yeah, but that's all about your being level too.
Yeah, and that's where it comes from, right? That soulful, creative place.
Like it's just another form of magic, if you ask me, of tricking yourself to get into that being level. And I've even seen it in modern day societies, like modern day things. We're just talking about.
You mean just switching into it?
Yeah, like the other night I was talking about Dead Mouse. To me he's just like some kid playing around with some DJ stuff, but he turned it into this whole new lifestyle, and
a lot of guys did.
Came into his own, but he's a little different than most of them. And you got all of these people just jumping up and down in a wave because they're just doing things at their being level. They're being a kid again. It doesn't really matter. And it's kind of sad that some people have to take acid and whatever to get to that point. I'm not saying it's bad that you do those things, that you have to take acid and LSD and mushrooms to get back to being that way again, to reset your mind. And I'm damn sure not going to say I've never done it. But something is fundamentally wrong in our society, I think, when somebody has to go overseas to take ibogaine or ayahuasca or something of that nature to get back to who they really were to begin with.
Oh, yeah. Well, you got to look at society. You got to look at culture. You have to look at history and how everything was put into place and see how everything had affected everything and people on a soul level, how the dysfunctionalities and the distractions and all of these take place, they take precedence and to a person's being. And so it affects them to the point where it gets to them to the point where they are uncomfortable in their own skin. So they'll do whatever they can to get out of themselves, even if it means going and taking expanding drugs or mind and mood altering chemicals and stuff like that. So, for me, it was always music, but I had been an alcoholic and a drug addict too for a long time. So I was like, that was another phase. That was another lifetime. So, but I can see both sides of the coin. Some people have to go through these things in order to come out the other side and, find out that there's a better way. Some other people, it just takes longer for them to get there.
I think it makes you interesting too. If Rogan's talking about this, if you've just had an easy life and your life's been pretty mundane and boring and you've never went through any really hard challenges and made it out on the other side, it's like you don't really have any character to yourself, So when somebody tells me, well, I went through this addiction phase and this depression thing or drugs or whatever it is, and they came out on the other side, that's cool to me. That's a character thing.
Yeah, well, everybody's got a story, you just sit down and listen to them for a while, from the mundane to the hyper extreme, and depending on where they are and who they are, it's always interesting because it's an experience that you did not experience. You can relate, you might be able to identify, but it's different because it wasn't yours. You know what I mean? So you can take all of these things into effect, and it just makes anybody interesting because they're here in front of you, giving of themselves, right? So you listen to where they are from where they were, and you look at them now, and you can feel the impact that it had on their life. And it's pretty cool. That's the entropy of life, dealing with somebody from that level, because you're totally in an acceptance of who you are and who they are.
We're in an entropy reduction trainer. That's what this reality is. That's what Thomas Campbell said. Right? Yeah.
Yeah. I kind of dug when he was talking about the fractal reality too, because I had just recently come across a couple of videos that went and reviewed over the fractal and the Mandelbrot systems and stuff like that, and how it pertained to life and how it was designed, and how these guys went crazy with the mathematics trying to pull it all together. And I was like, that just blew my head. I was like, this is way beyond my skill set.
No, I don't know. It may seem that way when you look at it on a chalkboard, but I think guys like Thomas, they can explain it in layman's terms, and then you understand it. And, it's like the thing Wayne sent me about the microtubules and how come the whole quantum theory of the microtubule thing where objects can, let's see how you're right. I'm starting to lose my words. Where objects can move between different distances, where it doesn't matter the distance. The theory of non-locality.
Yeah,
and
non-locality was pretty cool.
To a point, that's true. But he's saying, but it's not really a hologram like everybody's saying, and a quantum hologram. That's just a metaphor, because a hologram is a metaphor of what's actually going on. Because it's the best word that we can use to describe.
Well, I think Talbot was saying the same thing, and people weren't getting that. He was the one that wrote the book, the Holographic Universe, and he was really trying to get that across, that it was because they had no other way to describe it, to describe it other than a holographic universe at the time. I think for a lot of people, for a lot of us, we don't have the language yet to describe things like consciousness, you know, and what happens and all the intricate details of what makes up reality and what makes up life. I was listening to him, and as he was talking about the virtual reality of stuff, and Edgar Cayce, if you listen to some of his readings, was saying the same thing. Is your soul is basically projecting the reality that you're actually experiencing.
Can you imagine what he went through? You know, his story, it must have been rough growing up a Baptist and then going through what he went through. My grandfather's like, who are you talking about? Edgar Cayce, the sleeping prophet. Yeah, I've heard of him. That's demonic.
It's demonic.
Get the out of here.
Yeah.
It's not demonic. It really, I mean, this is kind of like
readings later.
Yeah, Dr. Stylianos the Teslas and Robert Monroe. See, there's real people doing real things. No offense to anybody that's out here going to these conferences and doing psychic stuff. I'm sure there's real people in there, but it's like there's these other type of people that are doing super profound things, you know, and I believe Thomas Campbell is one of them. I've never heard anybody call a scientist a modern day priestcraft, but if you really think about it, that's where we are.
Sure. I was talking about that before with you when I was mentioning the subject lines when we were going over like physics and the law, and you can't argue with, you know, the laws of physics. I was like, these people don't even have a clue as to what physics is. As far as they're concerned, they only know of minutia of what physics is in this universe because it's different all over the place.
I'm worried about Markham. I haven't talked to him. Has anybody talked to Markham in a few days? I haven't talked to him in a while.
No, I'll reach out later.
I know his dad is sick and dying of cancer, you know, and
is that right?
Yeah, and he's pretty tore up about it. And I mean, I don't want to get into the details,
works hard.
But it's kind of like when you go to the chemo doctor and they're like, well, here's your option. Take this chemo or don't.
Yeah.
Now imagine if that was your parent. I mean, Eric's a good dude, you know, so I think they're out looking for, and I can say dude when I'm talking about somebody like that, by the way.
You did it again.
I think they're talking about going and trying some alternative, maybe second opinion type stuff. I wonder if the chemo doctors, do they still get a kickback for selling chemo? Because I know they used to. They used to get a cut.
That's not my strength. I don't know. I had a sister-in-law, and she worked over in one of those hospitals in New York. I can't remember the name of it. But Sloan Kettering, I'm sorry. And so she was like really tight with a lot of these doctors. And for the most part, you know, they didn't really talk about that much, whether they were getting kickback from the chemo and stuff.
Well, I can tell you this. If interviewing Thomas Campbell is probably, in my opinion, the closest thing to interviewing Robert Monroe. And I have all three of Robert Monroe's books on audio at Audible, and I have all three of Thomas Campbell's books on audio at Audible. And I've listened to him at least once a year. Thomas is a little bit more harder to follow because he's breaking everything down scientifically in layman's terms. But it's easier once you start understanding what he's saying, everything really starts to make sense. Robert Monroe just kind of notated everything as it was happening, you know?
Right.
And so when you get the combination of both of those systems or both of those stories, it's mind-bending, man, to this whole thing we're living in. We think we understand it. We think we know everything about it. And I think we're just so far from knowing anything. I think we know maybe just a frog hair of what reality actually is.
I agree. I mean, I think one of the most important things that we might try to do is just know the self. Okay, get to understand the self. That's number one. But from a higher or larger standpoint, to at least get to know the reality from our place in the universe. If we can get to understand that, not in the public, you know, because God knows these black projects and everything like that have already evolved past that. So we won't talk about them, but we'll talk about in the public sector. How the people in the public sector should actually be more involved in getting to understand the reality about them. And if we're going to make a change, we can do it from that standpoint, as opposed to, as he was saying, just blaming everything on the cabal or whatever.
Oh, yeah,
name your your pain.
I think I'm really going to make some people mad here, but I think, yeah, he's right. I mean, and when I look on, well, I just won't say what I'm, but I won't say what website I'm looking at here, but when I see all these political talk radio shows, there's nothing positive. There's nothing really encouraging. There's nothing futuristic about it.
That's the agenda.
It's just a lot of people that are the victims of something that I believe this, but I'm a victim of that. And it's getting us nowhere, agenda. Man.
Because it keeps you and maintains your uncomfortability, and it keeps you in a state of, fear and angst, and you're not at peace. And so long as you're not at peace, then you're unstable.
I think the coolest part of the interview tonight was the fact that I asked probably one of the smartest men alive, in my opinion.
Thank you.
Not you. I asked Thomas Campbell, one of the smartest people alive, in my opinion, if we could actually bend the spoon with our mind. If you were paying attention tonight.
I had missed a good hour and a half. I'm sorry.
I did ask that question. And, his answer was, it depends. And
I agree.
That's exciting to me enough. The variable was the observer. In other words, you hear all these stories, like Greg Doyle told me he levitated, and people talk about lifting tables and seances and things.
Well, there's the stories about mothers who have lifted up cars to save their kids.
Yeah, but the way he looked at it is it depends on the observer. Look, like if you were doing these things in front of a crowd of people and they all witnessed this mind-bending reality happen,
let me ask you something. What's the difference between
system?
I don't think so.
Oh,
I don't think
Dan
so.
Lopez doesn't think Thomas Campbell's right. Yeah,
I don't think that if something as profound as that happened in front of a crowd of people, that it would actually change the reality of the scope of things, because such things have occurred and are still occurring to this day. Miracles are happening all the time.
Yeah, but when's the last time a stadium of people watched somebody levitate?
Yeah, but what's the difference between that happening and some miracle occurring before you?
That's his whole point. His whole point was, if I witness it, like a couple of people there that actually believe it and witness it, or maybe one other person, it doesn't shake up the system. It doesn't mess up the computer that much. We can talk about that later. We got to get out of here, though. I think you missed the point. Which happens. But yeah, tomorrow night it's going to be Dean Radin, Dr. Dean Radin. We're going to talk about real magic and his new book out. It's titled Real Magic, and you can get that book on Audible as well, too. It's on Amazon. Pick it up. Join us tomorrow night, because that's what we're going to be doing. And I think that tonight was another one of those staple nights, but I do have to close this out, and I want to say that this show was produced and broadcasted by the Fringe FM and cannot be syndicated without written permission. Music was by Chronox, Bundy, Space Station, and Kevin MacLeod. We'll see you guys tomorrow night. Good night.